They said her dress was a disgrace, called it rags stitched to rags, a patchwork of poverty that had no place among decent folk. The women in their imported silks laughed behind gloved hands, their cruelty echoing through the mercantile like breaking glass. Clara Whitmore felt each word like a physical blow, her cheeks burning with shame she couldn't afford to show. She'd come to town for medicine, for fabric, for hope, not to be torn apart by women who'd never worked a day in their pampered lives. But then the door opened, boot heels struck wood, and everything changed when a cowboy's voice cut through the mockery like a knife through silk. "She's still the finest woman here." Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The morning Clara Whitmore left for Salt Lake City, frost still clung to the fence posts like lace made of ice, and her father's cough rattled through the thin walls of their ranch house like stones in a tin can. She'd wrapped him in every quilt they owned, stoked the fire until it roared, and left a pot of broth within arm's reach before she'd even considered hitching the wagon. "Don't fuss, Clara girl," John Whitmore had wheezed, waving one weathered hand dismissively, even as his body shook with another coughing fit. "It's just the mountain cold settling in my chest. Been through worse." But they both knew that wasn't true. This wasn't just winter settling into aging lungs. This was something deeper, something that had stolen the color from her father's face and the strength from his hands. The same hands that had built their small ranch from nothing, that had taught her to rope and ride and survive when her mother had died bringing a stillborn son into the world 8 years ago. Clara had been 15 then. She was 23 now, and every one of those years showed in the dress she wore, a faded calico that had once been her mother's Sunday best, now patched at the elbows with fabric from an old curtain, the hem let down twice and reinforced with mismatched thread. She'd washed it the night before, scrubbed it against the washboard until her knuckles were raw, but no amount of lye soap could restore what time and hard work had taken. The wagon ride into Salt Lake City took 4 hours, and Clara spent every minute of it rehearsing her list. Laudanum for her father's cough, 3 yards of sturdy cotton if she could afford it, winter seed for the spring planting, and if there was anything left, which there wouldn't be, perhaps some sugar. Their small apple orchard had produced well that fall, but the payout from the processing plant had been less than expected, and the cattle they ran on their modest acreage barely numbered 20 head. They weren't poor exactly, but they existed in that precarious space between making it and losing everything, where every dollar had to fight for its place, where one bad winter or one failed crop or one serious illness could tip them over the edge into ruin. The city, when she finally reached it, bustled with a prosperity that felt almost offensive. Brick buildings lined streets where mud had been just 2 years ago. Ladies in fashionable dresses stepped carefully over boardwalks, their skirts held high to protect expensive fabric from dust that Clara had long since accepted as part of her permanent complexion. Men in suits conducted business beneath painted signs advertising everything from law services to fine jewelry, from surveying to investment opportunities. Clara guided her wagon to Thornton's Mercantile, the largest general store in the city and the only one that stocked the particular medicine her father needed. She set the brake, climbed down with practiced efficiency, and smoothed her patched skirt with hands that trembled just slightly. "It doesn't matter what they think," she told herself. "You're here for Papa. Get in, get what you need, get out." But the moment she pushed through the mercantile door, she knew this wasn't going to be simple. The store was crowded, more crowded than she'd ever seen it. At least a dozen women clustered near the fabric counter, their voices creating a symphony of privilege that made Clara's stomach clench. She recognized some of them. Margaret Fairchild, the mayor's wife, resplendent in emerald silk with jet beading. Susan Hartford, whose husband owned the bank and half the commercial buildings in the city. Dorothy Chen, the railroad director's daughter, her dress so new the fabric still held its shop-fresh sheen, and more. Women whose names Clara didn't know, but whose wealth she could read in every perfectly coiffed hair, every piece of jewelry, every yard of unblemished fabric. Clara kept her eyes down and moved toward the medicine counter at the back of the store, hoping to conduct her business invisibly. She almost made it. "Good heavens, what is that?" The voice, Susan Hartford's, high and carrying, stopped Clara mid-step. "I beg your pardon?" Mr. Thornton, the store owner, looked up from his ledger. "That garment. On that girl. Susan didn't bother lowering her voice. I've seen scarecrows dressed better. Laughter rippled through the cluster of women like poison spreading through water. Clara's face burned, but she forced herself to keep walking. Just get to the counter. Just ask for the medicine. Is that actually a dress? Or did someone stitch together every rag in the territory? More laughter. Clara's vision blurred at the edges, but she blinked hard and focused on Mr. Thornton's sympathetic face behind the counter. Miss Whitmore, he said kindly, his voice a lifeline. What can I help you with today? I need laudanum, Clara managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The strongest you have, and 3 yards of cotton, the cheapest grade, and winter seed, My dear, you can't be serious. Margaret Fairchild had detached from the group and now stood close enough that Clara could smell her expensive perfume. Coming into town wearing that? I'm here to purchase supplies, Mrs. Fairchild, Clara said quietly, keeping her eyes on Mr. Thornton. Not to model for Harper's Bazaar. A sharp gasp answered her mild retort. Well, Margaret's face flushed. I suppose we can't expect manners from someone who doesn't even know how to present herself properly. Indeed, Dorothy Chen added, stepping closer with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. That dress is positively indecent. All those patches. It's like wearing your poverty on your sleeve. Quite literally. If you can't afford proper clothing, perhaps you shouldn't come to town at all, Susan said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. It's embarrassing for everyone involved. Clara's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she kept her voice level. Mr. Thornton, the laudanum, please? Of course, Miss Whitmore. He turned toward the medical cabinet, but his movements were slow, as if he was hoping the situation would somehow resolve itself. It didn't. You know what it reminds me of? Susan continued, warming to her cruel entertainment. A quilt. But not even a nice quilt. One of those desperate pioneer things made from whatever scraps they could find. A potato sack would be an improvement, Margaret agreed. At least a potato sack knows what it is, Dorothy added, and the 3 women dissolved into laughter that felt like needles against Clara's skin. Other customers were watching now, men near the tobacco counter, a young couple examining tools, 2 older women by the yarn. Clara felt their eyes like weights, felt their pity or judgment or uncomfortable amusement pressing down on her shoulders. That'll be $2 for the laudanum, Mr. Thornton said quickly, setting the brown bottle on the counter. And I'll measure that fabric for you right now. $2? Susan's voice rose with theatrical shock. Can she even afford $2? Look at her. She's probably here to beg for credit. I have money, Clara said, and hated how defensive she sounded. She reached into her small purse, pulled out the carefully saved coins. I can pay. Oh, she can pay, Margaret stage whispered to her companions. She just can't afford a proper dress. Priorities, I suppose. My father is ill, Claire said, and immediately regretted it. She didn't owe these women explanations. The dress is functional. It serves its purpose. Functional. Dorothy laughed so hard she had to dab at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. My dear, a dress should do more than merely function. It should represent you. And what does that dress say? That you've given up? That you don't care about basic standards of appearance? It says I work for a living, Clara shot back, her control finally slipping. It says I don't have servants to launder silk. It says I spend my time keeping a ranch running and caring for my father, not attending tea parties and gossiping about other women's clothing. The silence that fell was sharp and dangerous. Margaret's face hardened. How dare you? How dare I what? Clara's fear had transformed into anger now, bright and hot in her chest. Tell the truth? You asked what my dress said. I told you. You insolent little ladies. The word wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like an axe through kindling. Every head in the mercantile turned toward the door. A man stood in the entrance, backlit by the afternoon sun, so that for a moment he was just a silhouette. Broad shoulders, tall frame, cowboy hat in hand. Then he stepped inside, and Clara saw him clearly. He was perhaps 30, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. His clothes were quality, a clean shirt, a well-made vest, trousers that actually fit properly, but they were working clothes, not city finery. Dust from the trail clung to his boots. His hands showed calluses. But something in the way he carried himself, in the quiet authority that preceded him like a wave, spoke of someone who didn't just work for a living. He commanded it. The women fell silent immediately. "Mr. Grant?" Margaret breathed, and Clara heard something shift in her voice. The cruelty replaced by honey-sweet charm. "What a wonderful surprise!" Wesley Grant, even Clara, who avoided town whenever possible, knew that name. Owner of the Grant Cattle Company, which ran more than 5,000 head across 3 counties. Supplier of beef to the railroad camps, the mining operations, half the restaurants in Salt Lake City. A man whose business decisions could make or break smaller ranchers, whose wealth was spoken of in the same tones usually reserved for railroad barons and silver mine owners. And he was looking directly at Clara, not at Margaret Fairchild in her emerald silk, not at Susan Hartford with her perfect coiffure, not at Dorothy Chen in her brand-new dress from San Francisco. At Clara, in her patched calico and worn boots, with her sun-weathered face and work-roughened hands. "Ma'am," he said, nodding to her with a respect that seemed genuine. "I couldn't help but overhear the conversation." Clara's throat went dry. Of course he'd heard. Everyone had heard. Her humiliation was now complete, witnessed not just by spiteful society women, but by one of the most powerful men in the territory. "Mr. Grant," Margaret gushed, practically pushing past Clara to get closer to him. "We were just having a little discussion about appropriate town attire. Nothing that would interest—" "No," Wesley said quietly, still looking at Clara. "You were mocking this woman's dress." The temperature in the mercantile seemed to drop 10 degrees. "We were merely observing," Susan began. "You were being cruel." Wesley's voice remained calm, but something in it made Susan's mouth snap shut. "You were taking pleasure in another person's embarrassment." "Mr. Grant, surely you understand that standards must be maintained," Dorothy tried, her voice wavering. "This is a respectable establishment, and she has more right to be here than any of you." Wesley moved deeper into the store, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. He stopped beside Clara, not crowding her, but close enough that his presence felt like a shield. "This woman," he said, gesturing to Clara without looking away from the 3 society ladies, "is wearing a dress that's been mended because she works too hard to replace it. That dress has fed livestock in the freezing cold. It's hauled water, it's planted crops, it's nursed a sick father. That dress has done more honest work than all your silk and satin combined." Margaret's face had gone from flushed to pale. "Mr. Grant, we didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." His voice was quiet, but it carried. "You meant every word. You saw someone you perceived as beneath you, and you took the opportunity to feel superior." "Now see here." Susan tried to muster her earlier hauteur, but it came out sounding weak. "We're simply people of quality who expect certain standards." "Quality," Wesley repeated, and something that might have been a smile touched his mouth. "You want to talk about quality?" He turned then, fully facing the 3 women, and Clara saw something fierce in his expression. "This woman runs a ranch with her sick father. She keeps livestock alive through mountain winters. She maintains orchards that produce apples I've personally bought and paid top dollar for. She does the work of 3 hired hands, and she does it without complaint." He paused, letting the words settle. "And you 3? His gaze swept over them like a judgment. "What do you do? Besides spend money your husbands earn and mock women who actually contribute to this territory's survival?" The silence was absolute. "Mr. Grant," Margaret whispered, and Clara heard genuine distress in her voice now. "Please, you must understand." "I understand perfectly." Wesley's voice was cold as mountain snow. "I understand that you're the kind of people who measure worth by appearance and status instead of character and work. I understand that you find entertainment in cruelty." He turned back to Clara, and his expression softened completely. "Ma'am, I apologize that you had to endure this. These women don't represent the best of Salt Lake City. They represent the worst. People who've forgotten that this territory was built by folks who worked too hard to care about fancy dresses." Clara couldn't speak. Her throat had closed with emotion she couldn't name. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper, something that felt like validation she hadn't known she needed. "And for the record," Wesley said, loudly enough that everyone in the mercantile could hear, "she's the finest woman in this room. That dress might be patched, but it's honest. And honest is worth more than all the silk in San Francisco. Then he did something that made Clara's heart stop. He removed his hat and held it over his heart, giving her a small bow, the kind of respectful acknowledgement that men usually reserved for queens or respected elders. "Wesley Grant, ma'am, owner of Grant Cattle Company, and I would be honored to help you carry your supplies to your wagon, if you'd permit it." Behind them, Clara heard Dorothy make a small, strangled sound of disbelief. Clara finally found her voice. "I can manage, Mr. Grant, but thank you for what you said." "Wasn't charity, ma'am. Just truth." He smiled then, and it transformed his face from stern to genuinely kind. "But I'd still like to help, if you'll allow it. Call it making amends for the poor hospitality you've received in our city." "She's already bought the laudanum," Mr. Thornton said quickly, and Clara heard relief in his voice. "Let me get that fabric measured right now. 3 yards of cotton, correct, Miss Whitmore?" "Yes, please." Clara's hands shook as she counted out coins. "And the winter seed—" "On the house," Mr. Thornton interrupted. "Mr. Thornton, I can't—" "You can, and you will." The store owner's face was firm. "Consider it my apology for allowing such behavior in my establishment." "Add the seed to my account," Wesley said, "and measure it properly. She paid for it. She should get what she ordered." "Mr. Grant, that's not necessary," Clara protested. "Neither was what just happened to you." He met her eyes steadily. "Please, let me do this small thing." There was something in his face, not pity, which Clara would have refused, but genuine concern, as if her dignity mattered to him. A stranger, more than appearances or social standing. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you." While Mr. Thornton hurried to measure fabric and package seed, the 3 society women made hasty exits, their heads down and their steps quick. Clara watched them go and felt a grim satisfaction that she immediately felt guilty about. "No," she told herself firmly. "They earned that. You don't have to feel guilty for being defended." "Miss Whitmore?" Wesley's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Clara," she said impulsively. "My name's Clara." "Clara." He smiled again, and Clara noticed details she'd missed before. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the lines around his eyes that spoke of someone who smiled often, the genuine warmth in his expression. "Wesley, though most folks call me Wes." "Wes," she repeated, testing the name. "Here we are, Miss Whitmore." Mr. Thornton presented her purchases wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. 3 yards of cotton, the seed, and the laudanum. "And please, give my regards to your father. Tell him Martin Thornton hopes he recovers quickly." "I will." "Thank you, Mr. Thornton." Wesley took the larger packages before Clara could protest, leaving her with only the laudanum to carry. Together they walked out of the mercantile into the late afternoon sun. Clara's wagon waited where she'd left it, her tired mare standing patient in the harness. Wesley loaded the packages into the wagon bed with efficient movements, then turned to face her. "I meant what I said in there," he told her, "about the dress, about the honesty. I wasn't just trying to embarrass those women, though I won't pretend I'm sorry they were embarrassed." "You didn't have to do that," Clara said. "Defend me, I mean. I'm nobody. You're somebody." His voice was firm. "You're a rancher's daughter who works her land and cares for her family. That makes you somebody important." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Not the burning shame from earlier, but something warmer, something that felt dangerously close to pleasure. "I know your father," Wesley continued. "John Whitmore, up in the foothills near Oakley Canyon. Small spread, maybe 50 acres. Runs cattle and keeps an apple orchard." "You know Papa." Clara's eyes widened. "Bought apples from him 3 years running. Best I've ever tasted. Used them for pies in the bunkhouse during fall roundup. My men talk about those pies all year." He smiled at the memory. "Your father's a good man. Honest in his dealings, fair in his prices. I was sorry to hear he's been ill." "The cough won't leave him." Clara heard the worry in her own voice. "It's been 3 weeks now, getting worse instead of better." "Mountain fever?" "I don't know. We can't afford a doctor's visit, so—" She gestured to the laudanum. "I'm doing what I can." Wesley's expression grew serious. "Dr. Harrison owes me a favor. A significant one. I could send him out to your place. No. Clara's response was immediate and instinctive. Thank you, but no. We don't take charity. It wouldn't be charity. It would be one rancher helping another. Your father sold me good apples at fair prices when I needed them. This would just be, returning the favor. Mr. Grant, Wes, he corrected gently. Wes. She took a breath. I appreciate what you did in there, more than I can say. But we manage. We always have. I can take care of my father. He studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing past her pride to the fear underneath, fear that her father wouldn't recover, that she couldn't keep the ranch going alone, that everything they'd built might slip through her fingers no matter how hard she worked. All right, he said finally, but if you change your mind, the offer stands, no strings attached. Thank you. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the sounds of the city bustling around them, wagons creaking past, men calling to each other, a piano playing somewhere in the distance. I should go, Clara said. It's a 4-hour drive home, and I need to be back before dark. Of course. Wesley stepped back, giving her space to climb into the wagon. But as she gathered the reins, he spoke again. Clara? She looked down at him. Would it be all right if I called on you sometime? Out at your ranch? Clara's breath caught. Called on me? Why? Because I'd like to see you again. He said it simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Talk with you, get to know you better. Maybe check on your father's orchard. I'm always looking for good apple suppliers. You're one of the richest men in 3 counties, Clara said bluntly. And I'm nobody, a ranch girl in a patched dress. You're a woman who works hard, speaks her mind, and has more integrity in her little finger than most people have in their entire body. Wesley's voice was steady. That's who I see, and that's who I'd like to know better. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. This couldn't be real. Men like Wesley Grant didn't court women like her. They married society girls with proper dresses and spotless reputations, girls who knew which fork to use and how to plan dinner parties. But the sincerity in his eyes didn't waver. She swallowed hard. Papa would need to meet you first, approve. Naturally? Well, Wesley smiled, and Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. I wouldn't have it any other way. How about next Sunday? I could ride out around noon? We don't have anything fancy to serve for dinner, Clara warned. Don't want fancy. Just want honest conversation and the chance to see you again. She should say no, should protect herself from the inevitable disappointment when he realized how different their worlds were, when he saw their small house and modest ranch and understood just how far beneath his station she really was. But something in her chest, something that had felt dead since her mother died and her father got sick, suddenly flickered to life like a coal stirred back into flame. Sunday, she heard herself say. Noon. Wesley's smile could have lit the whole city. Sunday at noon. I'll be there. He stepped back as Clara clicked to the mare and the wagon lurched forward. As she guided the horse through Salt Lake City's streets toward the mountain road home, she couldn't resist glancing back once. Wesley stood exactly where she'd left him, hat in hand, watching her go. And for the first time in 8 years, since the day they'd buried her mother and the stillborn brother she'd never met, Clara Whitmore felt something that might have been hope. The ride home took 5 hours because Clara kept replaying every moment in the mercantile, every word Wesley had spoken, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered, like her patched dress and rough hands and sun-weathered face were things to be respected rather than mocked. Don't be a fool, she told herself as the wagon climbed into the foothills. He's being kind, that's all. He'll come Sunday, have a polite visit, and then you'll never hear from him again. Men like that don't marry women like you. But even as she thought it, she remembered the respect in his voice when he'd said, "She's the finest woman in this room." And despite every warning her practical mind tried to offer, Clara's heart whispered a single, dangerous word. Maybe. The sun had dipped behind the mountains by the time Clara finally turned the wagon onto the rutted path that led to the Whitmore Ranch. Her father's cough greeted her before she even set the brake, a deep, rattling sound that echoed from inside the house and made her chest tighten with worry. Papa? She gathered the packages and hurried through the door, finding John Whitmore exactly where she'd left him, wrapped in quilts by the fire. But he looked worse now, his face more drawn, his breathing more labored. "I've got the laudanum. Let me get you some." "Took you long enough," he wheezed, but there was no real complaint in it. "Thought maybe you decided to stay in the city." "Not likely." Clara measured out a careful dose of the medicine, mixing it with water the way the label instructed. "Here, drink it slowly." John obeyed, making a face at the bitter taste. "Tastes like the devil's own bathwater." "Then it should work." Clara pulled a chair close to his side, studying his face in the firelight. The medicine would help with the pain and let him sleep, but it wouldn't cure whatever had settled in his lungs. "How do you feel? Honestly?" "Like I've been kicked by a horse and dragged through a river." He managed a weak smile. "But I'll live. Always have before." Clara wanted to believe him. Instead, she reached for his hand, the one that wasn't holding the cup, and squeezed it gently. His fingers felt thin and fragile, so different from the strong hands that had taught her to rope her first calf. "Tell me about town," John said after a moment. "Any news worth hearing?" Clara hesitated. She could tell him about the mercantile, about the cruelty of the society women and the unexpected defense from Wesley Grant. But that would lead to questions about Sunday, about the man coming to call, and suddenly Clara wasn't sure she was ready to speak those words aloud. Speaking them would make them real, and making them real would make the inevitable disappointment hurt more. "Nothing much," she said instead. "Got everything we needed. Mr. Thornton sends his regards and hopes you recover quickly." "Martin's a good man." John's eyes were already growing heavy from the laudanum. "Always fair in his prices." "Rest now, Papa. I'll get dinner started." But John's hand tightened on hers before she could rise. "Clara, girl?" "Yes?" "You're a good daughter, best a man could ask for." His voice was slurring now, sleep pulling him under. "Your mama would be proud. So proud of the woman you've become." Tears burned Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Sleep, Papa. We'll talk more in the morning." She waited until his breathing evened out and his hand relaxed in hers before she finally stood and moved to the kitchen. Through the window above the wash basin, she could see the apple orchard, bare branches stark against the twilight sky, waiting for spring to bring them back to life. "Wesley Grant knows, Papa," she thought as she began preparing a simple stew from dried beef and root vegetables. "He buys our apples. He thinks they're the best he's ever tasted." The memory of his words in the mercantile played through her mind again. Not just the defense, though that had been extraordinary enough, but the way he'd looked at her afterward, the genuine interest in his eyes when he'd asked to call on her. "Sunday," she reminded herself. He said Sunday at noon. That gave her 5 days to decide whether this was the biggest mistake of her life or the beginning of something she'd been too afraid to even hope for. The week that followed moved with strange contradictions, simultaneously crawling and racing, each day feeling endless while somehow Sunday approached with terrifying speed. Clara threw herself into ranch work with even more intensity than usual, as if physical exhaustion could quiet the anxiety building in her chest. She mucked stalls until her back ached. She checked fence lines in the freezing pre-dawn darkness. She inventoried their winter hay supply 3 times, not because it needed counting, but because counting kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. She spent one entire afternoon in the apple orchard with pruning shears, carefully trimming dead wood and shaping branches for next season's growth, even though the trees wouldn't wake for months yet. Her father improved slowly under the laudanum's care. The cough didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip enough that he could sleep through the night and take short walks around the property without gasping for breath. By Thursday, he was sitting at the kitchen table for meals instead of huddled by the fire. And by Friday, he was giving Clara advice about the spring planting that she didn't need but accepted gratefully because it meant he was getting stronger. It wasn't until Saturday morning, when Clara was sweeping the front porch with unnecessary vigor, that John finally asked the question she'd been dreading. "All right, girl, out with it." Clara looked up from her broom. "Out with what?" "Whatever's been eating at you all week." John stood in the doorway, wrapped in a heavy coat against the November cold. "You've been working like the devil himself is chasing you, and you jump every time a horse whinnies in the distance. What happened in town that you didn't tell me?" For a moment, Clara considered lying, but she'd never been good at deception, and her father had always been able to read her like a newspaper headline. "Someone defended me," she said quietly, leaning the broom against the porch rail. In the mercantile. Some women were saying cruel things about my dress, and a man, he stood up for me. John's eyes narrowed. What man? Wesley Grant. The silence that followed was heavy enough to have weight. Grant Cattle Company Wesley Grant, John said finally. Yes, Papa. And he defended you how exactly? Clara recounted the story, the mockery from the society women, Wesley's arrival, the words he'd spoken. She left nothing out except the flutter in her chest when Wesley had smiled at her, the warmth that had spread through her body when he'd called her the finest woman in the room. John listened without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable. When Clara finished, he was quiet for a long moment. And? He prompted. And what? Clara Whitmore, I've known you for 23 years. There's more to this story. Clara's cheeks heated. He asked if he could call on me. Tomorrow? Sunday. At noon. Call on you, John repeated slowly. As in court you. I suppose. Yes. The words came out barely above a whisper. I said yes. But Papa, if you don't approve, I can send word. Don't approve? John's eyebrows rose. Girl, Wesley Grant is one of the most respected ranchers in 3 counties. Fair in his dealings, honest in his business. I've sold him apples 3 years running, and he's always paid exactly what he promised, never tried to negotiate down or claim the fruit wasn't quality. But he's, Clara gestured helplessly. He's wealthy, Papa. Really wealthy. And we're honest working folk who've never cheated a soul or shirked a day's labor, John finished firmly. Clara, I know what you're thinking, that we're not good enough, that our ranch is too small, that you don't have the right dresses or manners or whatever nonsense those city women put in your head. But let me tell you something your mother told me once. He moved to sit on the porch step, patting the space beside him. Clara sat, pulling her shawl tighter against the cold. When I met your mama, John said, I was a farmhand making $20 a month. She was a school teacher making $30. Her folks thought she should marry the banker's son, nice house, steady income, respectable position. But she chose me instead, and you know what she said when her father asked her why? Clara shook her head. She said, because he sees me, not what I could do for him, or what status I could bring him. He sees who I am and values that. Your mother was the smartest woman I ever knew, and she taught me that when someone truly sees you, really sees you, that's worth more than all the money or status or fancy houses in the world. But what if he's just being kind? Clara's voice cracked. What if he comes tomorrow and realizes we're too different, that this was a mistake? Then he's a fool, and you're better off knowing it now. John put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close the way he had when she was small. But Clara girl, from what you've told me, that man didn't just defend you. He saw past your patched dress to the woman underneath. He knew about our orchard, our apples. He offered to send a doctor. Those aren't the actions of someone being polite. Those are the actions of someone paying attention. Clara leaned into her father's warmth, feeling some of the tension in her chest begin to ease. Give him a chance, John said quietly. Give yourself a chance. You've spent 8 years taking care of me and this ranch, putting yourself last. Maybe it's time you let someone see you the way your mother saw me, for exactly who you are. I'm scared, Clara admitted. Good, means it matters. John kissed the top of her head. Now, let's talk about dinner tomorrow. I assume you're planning to feed this man? Papa? Clara pulled back, mortified. I don't even know what to serve. We don't have anything fancy, and we'll serve what we have. Roast chicken if you can catch one of the laying hens that stopped producing. Root vegetables from the cellar. Apple pie from the preserves. John's voice was practical and sure. If Wesley Grant can't appreciate honest food, then he's not the man I think he is. Clara spent the rest of Saturday in a flurry of preparation that she tried very hard to pretend wasn't preparation. She caught the old hen that had stopped laying, the one they'd been meaning to cull anyway, and dressed it for roasting. She descended into the root cellar and selected the best potatoes, carrots, and onions. She made pie crust and filled it with the apple preserves they'd put up in September, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the small kitchen until even her father smiled. She scrubbed the kitchen table until the wood gleamed. She swept and mopped the floors. She polished the windows and beat the rag rugs and arranged wildflowers. Dried autumn grasses, really, but they looked cheerful in the cracked pottery vase that had been her mother's. And then, when the house was as clean as hard work could make it, Clara turned her attention to herself. She had exactly 2 dresses, the patched calico she'd worn to town and a slightly better brown wool that she saved for church on the rare Sundays they could afford the time away from ranch work. Neither was fine. Neither would make society women gasp with envy. But the brown wool was whole and clean, and when Clara pressed it carefully with the heavy iron heated on the stove, it looked almost respectable. She washed her hair in water heated over the fire, using the last bit of lavender soap she'd made in summer. She scrubbed her work-roughened hands until they were as soft as she could make them. She even attempted to style her hair in something more elegant than her usual practical braid, though the result was only moderately successful. That night, lying in her narrow bed with the quilt pulled to her chin, Clara stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. But her mind refused to cooperate, serving up an endless parade of disasters. Wesley would take one look at their humble house and make polite excuses. He would realize she had no conversation skills, no knowledge of the wider world beyond her small ranch. He would see her rough hands and sun-darkened skin and wonder what he'd been thinking. Or worse, he would be kind. He would sit through dinner making gentle small talk, and then he would leave and never return, and Clara would spend the rest of her life wondering what she'd done wrong. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and full of dreams she couldn't quite remember when morning light crept through her window. Sunday dawned cold and bright, the kind of November day where the sky stretched impossibly blue above mountains already dusted with early snow. Clara was up before dawn, stoking the fire and starting the chicken roasting even though noon was hours away. Her father found her at 7, pacing the kitchen and straightening things that didn't need straightening. "Clara, sit down before you wear a hole in the floor." "I can't sit. There's too much to do." "Everything's done." John caught her by the shoulders and steered her firmly into a chair. "The house is clean enough for visiting royalty. The food smells like heaven itself decided to take up residence in our kitchen. You look lovely. Now breathe." Clara tried. It came out shaky. "Tell me about the orchard," John said, settling into the chair across from her. "What did you think of the pruning?" It was a transparent attempt at distraction, but Clara latched onto it gratefully. They talked about the trees, about spring grafting plans, about whether they should expand the orchard by another acre or focus on improving the yield from existing trees. Gradually, Clara's hands stopped shaking and her breathing evened out. At 11:30, Clara went to her room and changed into the brown wool dress. She checked her hair 3 times in the small mirror, tucked and retucked loose strands, and finally gave up trying to achieve perfection she didn't have the skills or materials for. At 11:45, she returned to the kitchen to find her father had changed into his Sunday shirt and combed his hair. "Papa, you didn't have to—" "A man comes courting my daughter. I'm going to look presentable." John adjusted his collar. "Besides, I want to get a proper measure of this Wesley Grant. See if he's worthy of you." "Papa—" The sound of hoofbeats cut off whatever Clara had been about to say. Her heart launched into her throat. Through the kitchen window she could see a rider approaching, a tall figure on a gray horse, moving at an easy canter up their lane. "Breathe, girl," John murmured. Clara tried, failed, tried again. The hoofbeats stopped. A moment later, boot heels struck the porch steps. The knock, when it came, was firm but not aggressive. John gave Clara an encouraging nod and moved to open the door. Wesley Grant stood on their porch, hat in hand, looking nothing like the powerful cattle baron Clara remembered from town. He wore clean work clothes, a blue shirt, dark trousers, a leather vest, and his hair was slightly mussed from the ride. But his smile was genuine and his eyes were kind, and when his gaze found Clara standing in the kitchen doorway, something in his expression softened. "Mr. Whitmore," Wesley said, extending his hand to John. "Wesley Grant. Thank you for allowing me to visit." Come in, come in." John shook his hand firmly, and Clara saw her father taking Wesley's measure with the practiced eye of a man who'd spent a lifetime judging character. "No sense standing in the cold." Wesley stepped inside, and suddenly their small kitchen felt even smaller with his tall frame filling the doorway. But he didn't seem uncomfortable or condescending about their modest home. Instead, he looked around with genuine interest. "Smells incredible in here," he said. "Clara's cooking," John said with unmistakable pride. "Best cook in the territory, though I may be biased." "Papa?" Clara protested weakly, but Wesley was looking at her now, and the warmth in his eyes made her forget what she'd been about to say. "Miss Clara." He gave her the same respectful nod he'd given in town, as if she were someone important. "Thank you for allowing me to call. You look lovely." "Thank you." Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "You're right on time. Punctuality's important." Wesley smiled. "My mother used to say that being late tells people their time isn't valuable to you." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," John observed. "She was. Passed 5 years ago, but I still hear her voice sometimes, especially when I'm tempted to cut corners or take shortcuts." Wesley's expression grew wistful for a moment, then brightened. "She would have liked your apples, Mr. Whitmore. She always said the best food came from people who put their heart into growing it." John's posture relaxed slightly. "Would you like to sit? Dinner won't be ready for another hour, but we've got coffee." "Coffee would be fine." "Thank you." They settled around the kitchen table, Wesley and John on one side, Clara on the other, as she poured coffee from the pot she'd kept warm on the stove. Her hands trembled slightly as she filled Wesley's cup, but if he noticed, he was kind enough not to comment. "So," John said after taking a sip of his own coffee, "Clara tells me you defended her in town last week. I wanted to thank you for that." "No thanks necessary. Those women were out of line." Wesley's jaw tightened slightly at the memory. "I've known Margaret Fairchild and her circle for years. They're not bad people exactly, but they've forgotten what it's like to struggle. They've forgotten that this territory was built by people who worked with their hands." "You work with yours," John observed, nodding to the calluses visible on Wesley's palms. "Every day. My father taught me that a man who won't work beside his hands can't expect their respect. I still help with roundups, still rope and brand, still spend weeks at a time in a saddle during cattle drives." Wesley smiled. "Though I admit I appreciate a hot bath and a real bed when I get back to the ranch house." "Nothing wrong with that," John said. "How big is your operation now?" "About 5,000 head across 3 counties. We supply beef to the railroad camps, the mining operations, several restaurants in Salt Lake City and Ogden. Just signed a contract with the military fort east of here." Wesley spoke matter-of-factly, without boasting. "It's good business, but it means I'm on the road more than I'd like." "That's impressive," Clara said, then immediately felt foolish. Of course it was impressive. Everyone knew Grant Cattle Company was one of the largest operations in the territory, but Wesley looked at her like she'd said something profound. "Thank you, though honestly, I admire what you and your father have built here more." Clara blinked. "What we've built? We have 50 acres and maybe 20 head of cattle." "You have something better than size. You have sustainability. Your orchard produces consistently quality fruit. Your cattle are healthy. Your fences are maintained. Everything I saw writing in tells me this ranch is managed with care and intelligence." Wesley leaned forward slightly. "I've seen plenty of large operations collapse because the owners got too big too fast and couldn't maintain quality. You've built something that lasts." "That's kind of you to say," John said, but Clara heard the pleasure in his voice. "It's honest. There's a difference." Wesley took another sip of coffee. "Actually, I wanted to ask about your orchard. The apples I've bought from you. They're Arkansas Blacks, aren't they?" John's eyebrows rose. "You know your varieties." "I try. Arkansas Blacks are perfect for pies. They hold their shape when cooked and have that nice tart sweet balance. But they're temperamental to grow in mountain climates. How do you manage the late frost risk?" And just like that, the conversation shifted into easy territory. John and Wesley discussed orchard management, frost protection techniques, pruning schedules, pest control, soil amendment. Clara listened, impressed despite herself at how much Wesley actually knew about cultivation. This wasn't polite small talk from a wealthy man trying to seem interested. This was genuine agricultural knowledge from someone who paid attention. When the conversation turned to cattle management, Clara found herself contributing ideas about winter feeding and spring calving schedules. Wesley listened to her with the same attention he gave her father, asking thoughtful questions and nodding at her observations like they mattered. The hour passed faster than Clara could track. Before she realized it, the chicken was done, and she was serving dinner: roasted bird with crispy skin, root vegetables glazed with butter and herbs, fresh bread that she'd baked yesterday. Simple food, but prepared with care. Wesley's first bite was followed by a sound that might have been a moan of pleasure. "Miss Clara, this is outstanding." "It's just chicken," Clara protested. "No, it's perfectly seasoned, perfectly roasted chicken. There's a difference." Wesley took another bite. "You could serve this in any restaurant in Salt Lake City and charge top dollar." "Now you're just flattering me." "I'm really not. I eat in restaurants regularly, part of business, meeting with buyers and suppliers. Most of them overcomplicate things, add too much seasoning, try too hard." He gestured with his fork. "This is honest food, prepared well. It's worth more than fancy presentation." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from the genuine appreciation in Wesley's voice, the way he looked at her like her cooking, her work, mattered. The meal continued with easy conversation. Wesley told stories about cattle drives and difficult river crossings, about stubborn bulls and loyal horses. John shared tales from their early years establishing the ranch, when money was so tight they'd survived one winter mostly on dried beans and determination. Clara found herself laughing, actually laughing, at Wesley's description of a particularly ornery steer that had taken 3 hours to load into a cattle car. When the apple pie appeared, Wesley's eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. "Is this made from your preserves?" "Yes," Clara said, "from September's apples." He took a bite and closed his eyes. This is why I keep coming back to buy your fruit. That perfect balance of tart and sweet, that's the Arkansas black showing through. Most people add too much sugar and hide the apple flavor. You let it shine." "Mama taught her," John said quietly, before she passed. "Then your mother was an excellent teacher." Wesley looked at Clara with something that might have been wonder. "Miss Clara, you have a gift." After dinner, John excused himself for his afternoon rest. The cough was better, but still tired him easily. This left Clara and Wesley alone at the table with coffee cups and the last of the pie. The silence that fell wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but Clara felt suddenly aware of every breath, every small movement. "Would you like to see the orchard?" she asked, needing to fill the quiet. "Papa's very proud of it." "I'd love to." They bundled into coats and stepped out into the cold afternoon. The sun was already beginning its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Clara led Wesley through the bare apple trees, pointing out different varieties and explaining their father's careful planning. Early season apples here, late season there, the Arkansas blacks in the south section where they got the most sun. Wesley listened and asked questions that showed he was truly paying attention. When they reached the edge of the orchard, where the land sloped down toward a small creek, he paused. "This is beautiful," he said quietly. "Peaceful." Clara looked at the view she saw every day, mountains rising sharp against the sky, the valley spreading below, their small ranch nested in the foothills like a secret. She'd never thought of it as beautiful. It was just home. "It is, isn't it?" she said, seeing it fresh through his eyes. "Clara," Wesley turned to face her, his expression serious. "I need to be honest with you about something." Her heart sank. Here it came, the gentle letdown, the explanation that this had all been a mistake. "All right," she managed. "I didn't defend you in that mercantile just because those women were being cruel. I mean, that was reason enough. But the truth is," he paused, seeming to gather his thoughts, "I'd noticed you before. 3 years ago, when I first came to buy apples from your father. You were working in the orchard, up on a ladder picking fruit. Your father called you down to help with the transaction, and you climbed down and shook my hand like an equal. No simpering, no false modesty, just honest and direct." Clara stared at him, unable to speak. "I've thought about you since then," Wesley continued. "Every time I came to buy apples, I hoped I'd see you. When I heard those women mocking you last week, something in me just snapped. Because I'd seen who you really were, and I knew they were blind." "Why?" Clara finally found her voice. "Why would you think about me? You could have anyone. Society women with proper dresses and perfect manners. I don't want perfect manners. I want honest conversation. Wesley took a small step closer. I want someone who knows what hard work means, who understands the land, who can discuss cattle management and orchard cultivation. I want someone who makes extraordinary pie and doesn't realize how extraordinary she is. I'm nobody special, Clara whispered. You're everything special. His voice was firm. You're exactly who I've been looking for, even when I didn't know I was looking. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them standing in the orchard. The cold air, the fading light, the way Wesley was looking at her like she hung the moon. I don't know how to do this, Clara admitted. Papa's been sick and the ranch, and I've never had time for courting or anything like that. I don't know the rules. Then we'll make our own rules. Wesley smiled. How about this? I'd like to call on you again next week, and the week after that, if you'll allow it. I'd like to get to know you better, let you get to know me. No pressure, no expectations except honest conversation and time spent together. Just that? Just that. He paused. Unless you'd prefer I not come back, in which case I'll respect that, though I'll admit I'd be disappointed. Clara's mind raced. This was crazy. He was wealthy and established and could have anyone. She was a ranch girl with one good dress and rough hands and no prospects beyond keeping her small family operation afloat. But he'd seen her, really seen her, past the patches and the poverty to something he valued. And wasn't that worth taking a chance on? Next Sunday, she heard herself say. You could come next Sunday, if you want. Wesley's smile could have lit the darkening sky. I want, very much. They walked back to the house as the first stars appeared overhead. At the porch, Wesley retrieved his hat and prepared to mount his horse. Thank you for today, he said, for letting me visit, for the excellent dinner, for showing me the orchard, and for giving me something to look forward to next week. Thank you for coming. Clara wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. And for seeing me. Always. He settled his hat on his head. Take care of your father. And yourself. I will. She watched him ride away into the gathering darkness, one hand raised in farewell until he disappeared around the bend in the lane. Only then did Clara allow herself to lean against the porch post and release the breath she'd been holding. Inside, her father called out, Well? Clara came back into the warm kitchen to find John sitting at the table with fresh coffee, his eyes bright with curiosity. Well, what? Don't play coy with me, girl. What do you think? Clara sank into the chair across from him, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. I think, she said slowly, that maybe this isn't a mistake after all. John reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's my girl. Now tell me everything. And Clara did, reliving every moment of the afternoon while her father listened and smiled, and somewhere in the telling, the fear that had gripped her heart all week began to loosen its hold, replaced by something that felt dangerously, wonderfully like hope. The week that followed Wesley's first visit moved differently than the one before it. Where Claire had spent the previous days consumed by anxious anticipation, now she found herself floating through chores with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. She caught herself humming while feeding the chickens, smiling at nothing while mending fence, pausing in her work to replay moments from Sunday, the way Wesley had looked at her across the dinner table, the sincerity in his voice when he'd said she was everything special, the warmth in his eyes when he'd asked to come back. Her father noticed immediately, of course. John Whitmore might have been weakened by illness, but his observation skills remained sharp as ever. You're going to float right off this ranch if you're not careful, he commented on Tuesday morning, watching Clara practically dance through the kitchen while making breakfast. I don't know what you mean, Clara replied, but she couldn't suppress her smile. John's eyes twinkled. And I suppose that glow on your face has nothing to do with a certain cattle baron? Clara felt heat rush to her cheeks. Papa? I'm just saying, it's good to see you happy. You've spent too many years being serious and worried. About time someone reminded you you're allowed to feel joy. The sentiment stayed with Clara throughout the week. She realized her father was right, somewhere along the way, between her mother's death and her father's illness, and the constant struggle to keep their small ranch afloat. She'd forgotten how to be anything except responsible. She'd become so focused on survival that she'd stopped believing in the possibility of something more. But Wesley had looked at her like she was more. Like she was someone worth knowing, worth pursuing, worth the 4-hour round trip from his ranch to hers. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor. Clara was in the barn mucking stalls when she heard a horse approach. Her heart leaped. Could Wesley have come early? But when she emerged into the afternoon light, she found not Wesley but a stranger. The man was older, perhaps 50, with a neatly trimmed beard and clothes that marked him as educated, a town professional rather than a working rancher. He dismounted with the careful movements of someone unaccustomed to long rides. "Miss Whitmore," he called out. "Yes?" Clara approached cautiously, wiping her dirty hands on her apron. "I'm Dr. Marcus Harrison. Wesley Grant sent me to check on your father." Clara stopped mid-step. "Wesley sent you?" "He did. Said John Whitmore had been suffering from a persistent cough and could use a proper medical examination." Dr. Harrison smiled kindly. "Don't worry about payment. Mr. Grant and I have an arrangement. Consider this a favor between colleagues." Clara's first instinct was to refuse, to send the doctor away with thanks, but no thanks because they didn't accept charity. But then she thought of her father's labored breathing, the way the cough still rattled his chest at night, and pride suddenly seemed less important than Papa's health. "He's inside," Clara said. "Follow me." John protested naturally the moment he understood why the doctor had come. "I don't need a doctor poking at me. I'm fine." "You're not fine, Papa. You can barely walk to the barn without getting winded." Clara crossed her arms. "Let Dr. Harrison examine you, please." The examination took 30 minutes. Dr. Harrison listened to John's lungs, checked his temperature and pulse, asked detailed questions about symptoms and duration. Finally, he sat back with a thoughtful expression. "It's not mountain fever," he announced. "It's bronchitis, inflammation of the airways and the lungs. The laudanum helps with the cough, but you need something to fight the underlying infection." He produced a bottle from his medical bag. "This is a tincture of wild cherry bark, horehound, and a few other ingredients. Take 1 spoonful 3 times a day with meals. And you need steam treatments. Boil water with eucalyptus leaves if you have them, pine needles if you don't, and breathe in the vapor twice daily. It'll help loosen the congestion." "How much do I owe you?" John asked gruffly. "Nothing. As I said, Mr. Grant and I have an arrangement." Dr. Harrison stood, gathering his bag. "But I'll check back in 2 weeks to see how you're progressing. And Miss Whitmore?" He turned to Clara. "Make sure he rests, actually rests, not just sits by the fire while planning ranch work. His lungs need time to heal." After the doctor left, John sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the medicine bottle in his hands. "Wesley didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "No," Clara agreed. "He didn't. That's a man who cares about you, Clara girl. Really cares. Men don't send expensive doctors for women they're just being polite to." Clara's throat tightened with emotion. Wesley had heard her worry about her father and had acted on it, quietly and without fanfare. Not because he wanted credit, but because he'd seen a need and had the means to address it. That night, Clara wrote her first letter to Wesley. She'd never been good with written words, but she felt she owed him thanks that couldn't wait until Sunday. "Mr. Grant," she began, then crossed it out and started again. "Wesley, Dr. Harrison came today. Papa is already breathing easier with the new medicine. I don't know how to thank you properly for such kindness. You saw a need and filled it without asking for acknowledgement or repayment. That speaks to the kind of man you are, the kind who sees beyond himself to care for others. I look forward to Sunday with more anticipation than I probably should admit. Until then, know that your thoughtfulness has made a real difference to our family. Yours truly, Clara." She almost signed it sincerely instead of yours truly, but at the last moment decided that the more personal closing felt honest, because the truth was, she was beginning to feel like she could be his, that maybe, impossibly, she wanted to be. She gave the letter to the postal rider who passed through their area every Thursday, paying the 5 cents for delivery with money she'd intended to save. Some things, she decided, were worth the expense. Friday brought Wesley's response, delivered by the same postal rider with a knowing smile. "Clara," the letter read in strong, confident handwriting. "I'm grateful Dr. Harrison could help your father. Please don't thank me. I only did what anyone with means and conscience should do when they see someone suffering. If anything, I should thank you for allowing me to help, for trusting me enough not to refuse out of pride. I confess I've been counting the days until Sunday, like a schoolboy anticipating summer holiday. Your company, your conversation, your laughter, these are things I find myself thinking about when I should be focused on ranch business. My foreman thinks I've lost my mind. He might be right. Until Sunday, I remain faithfully yours, Wesley. Claire read the letter 3 times, each time feeling warmth spread through her chest at the phrase, faithfully yours. She tucked it into her pocket and carried it with her throughout the day, touching the folded paper occasionally like a talisman. Saturday, Clara baked. She made another apple pie, a batch of sugar cookies with the last of their precious sugar, and a loaf of sweet bread studded with dried cherries from the previous summer's harvest. John watched her flurry of activity with obvious amusement. You planning to feed an army or just one cowboy? I want everything to be nice, Clara defended herself. Last week I barely had time to prepare. This week I can do it properly. Last week was perfect, John pointed out. The man couldn't stop complimenting your cooking, but I'm not going to stop you from baking. Means I get to sample the results. Clara swatted at him with a dish towel, laughing. Her father's color was better this week, she noticed. Dr. Harrison's medicine was working. The cough hadn't disappeared, but it had loosened considerably, and John could walk around the property without gasping for breath. That night, Clara took extra care with her appearance. She washed her hair again, pressed her brown wool dress until not a wrinkle remained, and even attempted a more sophisticated hairstyle with the help of an old ladies' magazine illustration she'd found in the Mercantile months ago. The result wasn't perfect, but it was an improvement over her usual simple braid. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold, with frost coating every surface like diamond dust. Clara was up before first light, restless with anticipation. She made coffee, started breakfast, tidied things that didn't need tidying, and generally drove her father to distraction until he finally ordered her to sit down and eat something. You're making me nervous, and I'm not even the one being courted, John said, pushing a plate of eggs toward her. Eat. The man doesn't arrive for 4 more hours. But those 4 hours passed both agonizingly slowly and terrifyingly fast. Before Clara was quite ready, she heard hoofbeats approaching, and her heart launched into her throat. Wesley arrived exactly at noon, just as he had the previous week. But this time, when John opened the door, Wesley held not just his hat, but a small wrapped package. Mr. Whitmore, good to see you again. I hope you're feeling better? Wesley shook John's hand warmly. Much better, thanks to you. John's voice was gruff, but genuinely grateful. Come in, come in. Wesley entered, and his eyes immediately sought Clara. When he found her standing by the stove, his entire face brightened. Miss Clara, you look beautiful. Thank you. Clara smoothed her skirt nervously. You're very punctual. I've been waiting all week for noon to arrive. Wasn't going to risk being late. He held out the package. I brought you something. Well, both of you, really. Clara accepted the package, feeling the weight of something substantial inside. When she unwrapped it, she found books, 3 of them. Agricultural texts about orchard management, pest control, and modern cultivation techniques. Oh, she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed covers. Books were expensive, precious things. They owned exactly 4 books total, her mother's Bible, an old almanac, a primer from Clara's childhood, and a book of poetry so worn the binding had failed. I noticed you didn't have many reference materials last week, Wesley explained. These are from my own library, books that helped me improve my operation. I thought they might be useful for your orchard expansion plans. Wesley, this is too much, Clara began. It's knowledge, Wesley interrupted gently. Knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. Besides, they're yours now. You'll probably get more use from them than I did. John was already paging through one of the volumes, his eyes lighting up as he scanned chapters on frost protection and soil enrichment. These are exactly what we needed. The information in here, Clara, look at the section on grafting techniques. Dinner that week was even better than the first. Clara's preparation time had allowed her to create a more elaborate meal. Roasted pork with herbs, potatoes au gratin, green beans from their summer canning, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and the pie and cookies she'd made yesterday. Wesley praised every dish with genuine enthusiasm, but Clara noticed he also ate with the appetite of a working man who appreciated good food rather than the dainty picking of someone being merely polite. The conversation flowed easier this week, too. Wesley told them about a difficult cattle drive the previous month, where they'd lost 3 days to an unexpected early snowstorm. John shared stories from his younger days working as a ranch hand before buying this property. Clara found herself contributing more, her natural shyness easing in the face of Wesley's genuine interest in her opinions. "You mentioned expanding the orchard," Wesley said during the meal. "How many acres are you considering?" "Maybe 2 more," John said. "But that's a significant investment. Trees, time to maturity, additional irrigation. We'd need to save for a few years before we could afford it." "What if you had a guaranteed buyer?" Wesley leaned forward. "Clara, your apples are the best I've found. My operation goes through hundreds of bushels during cattle drive season alone. The men love apple pie, and it stores better than most desserts. If you could increase production, I'd commit to buying your entire surplus at premium prices." Clara and John exchanged glances. "That's generous," Clara said carefully. "But what if the quality drops with increased production? What if we can't maintain the same standards?" "Then we adjust." Wesley's response was immediate. "But I've seen your operation. You're not the type to cut corners or sacrifice quality for volume. You'd scale responsibly, maintain your practices. That's worth paying for." "It would give us the capital to expand," John said thoughtfully. "With a guaranteed buyer, we could justify the investment." "Think about it," Wesley suggested. "No pressure. But the offer stands. Whatever you can produce at your current quality, I'll buy." After dinner, Clara served the pie and cookies, while John pulled out the new orchard books and began asking Wesley technical questions about pest management. Wesley answered thoughtfully, occasionally admitting when something was outside his expertise, but suggesting people who might know more. Clara watched them talk. Her father's color better than it had been in weeks, animated and engaged in a way she hadn't seen since before the illness struck. And Wesley, wealthy and powerful enough to dismiss a small rancher's questions, instead treating John with genuine respect and interest. This was real, Clara realized with a jolt. This wasn't polite courtesy or temporary kindness. Wesley actually cared about them, about her father's health, about their ranch's success, about her. When John excused himself for his afternoon rest, Clara and Wesley bundled into coats for another walk through the orchard. The afternoon sun slanted through the bare branches, creating patterns of light and shadow on the frozen ground. "Your father looks much better," Wesley observed as they walked. "Dr. Harrison's medicine is working. Papa's breathing easier, sleeping better. I can't thank you enough for sending him." "You already thanked me in your letter." Wesley's smile was soft. "Which was beautiful, by the way. Your words, I mean." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the cold air. "I'm not good with writing." "You're good with honesty, which is better. So many people hide behind fancy language and flowery phrases. You say what you mean." They reached the creek at the orchard's edge, where ice had formed along the banks, but water still flowed in the center, creating a musical, burbling sound. "Clara." Wesley stopped walking, turning to face her. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, even if you think it might hurt my feelings." Clara's heart stuttered. "All right. Do you see a future in this? In us?" His gray eyes were serious, searching her face. "Because I do. I see it very clearly. But if you don't, if I'm moving too fast, or if you're just being kind because I defended you in town, I need to know now before I fall any deeper." "Deeper?" Clara's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I'm falling for you, Clara. Maybe I started falling 3 years ago when you climbed down from that ladder and shook my hand like an equal. Maybe it happened last week when you served dinner with such grace despite being nervous. Maybe it's happening right now, standing here watching you process what I just said." He took a careful step closer. "But it's happening. And I need to know if you feel anything similar or if I should step back and let you breathe." Clara's mind raced. This was too much, too fast. They'd only spent 2 Sundays together. People didn't fall in love in 2 weeks, except she'd been thinking about him constantly, replaying conversations, treasuring his letter, counting hours until she'd see him again. feeling something warm and bright bloom in her chest every time he smiled at her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "We're from different worlds, Wesley. You have money and status and opportunities. I have a small ranch and one good dress and hands that will never be soft no matter how much I scrub them. What if this is just... What if the novelty wears off and you realize I'm not enough?" "Not enough?" Wesley's voice carried genuine disbelief. "Clara, you're everything. You're intelligent and hardworking and kind. You care for your father with devotion I admire. You run a ranch that would break lesser people. You make the best pie I've ever tasted, and you speak your mind, and you don't pretend to be something you're not." He reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, his calloused fingers closed gently around hers. "I don't want soft hands," he said quietly. "I want honest ones. I don't want someone who fits into society's expectations. I want someone who fits with me. And Clara, you fit perfectly." Tears pricked Clara's eyes. "I feel it too," she whispered. "This thing between us. I've been trying not to because it seemed impossible, but I do. I think about you all the time. I look forward to your visits like they're the best part of my week. My only good part, honestly." Wesley's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "Then let's see where this goes. No rushing, no pressure. Just let me court you properly. Let me show you that this isn't novelty or charity or whatever you're afraid it might be. Let me prove that I see you, really see you, and I want exactly what I see. What if I disappoint you? What if you don't?" He smiled. "What if this is exactly what both of us have been looking for without knowing it?" Clara looked at their joined hands, his larger and darker, hers smaller but equally weathered by work. They matched in a way that felt right, like two pieces of the same puzzle. "All right," she said, "let's see where it goes." Wesley's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something joyful and young. "Yeah?" "Yeah." Clara smiled back, feeling something tight in her chest finally loosen. "But Wesley, you should know. I've never done this before. Courting, I mean. I don't know the rules or expectations, or me neither," he admitted. "Oh, I've been on a few dates over the years, but nothing serious, nothing that felt like this. So we'll figure it out together. Deal?" "Deal." They stood there by the frozen creek, hands clasped, grinning at each other like fools until the cold finally drove them back toward the house. At the door, Wesley paused. "There's something else I wanted to ask you." "What's that?" "The Founders' Day Ball is in 3 weeks. It's a big event. All of Salt Lake City society turns out, lots of dancing and elaborate dresses and general fuss." He took a breath. "I'd like to take you as my guest. Publicly." Clara's stomach dropped. "Wesley, I can't. I don't have anything appropriate to wear, and those women who mocked me in the mercantile will be there, and those women don't matter." His voice was firm. "Clara, I want to dance with you. I want to introduce you to people who matter to me as someone who matters to me. I want..." He paused. "I want everyone to know I'm courting you, that you're special to me, that I'm proud to be seen with you." "In my patched dress?" "Make a new dress. Use that fabric we bought at the mercantile. Or buy new fabric. I'll give you money." "No." Claire's refusal was automatic. "I won't take money for clothes." "Then let me phrase it differently. I'll pay for the fabric as part of courting you. It's normal for a man to give gifts during courtship. Let me do this, Clara, please." She wanted to refuse. Pride demanded she refuse. But something in his eyes, the genuine hope, the desire to give her something nice, made her hesitate. "I'll make a new dress," she said finally, "but I'll use my own money. However..." She took a breath. "If you wanted to help me pick out the fabric, make sure I choose something appropriate for a fancy ball, I suppose that would be acceptable." Wesley's smile said he knew exactly what compromise she'd just made and appreciated it. "How about next Saturday? We could ride into town together, get the fabric, maybe have dinner at the hotel restaurant?" "That sounds..." Clara swallowed. "That sounds wonderful." The following week passed in a blur of activity. John continued improving under Dr. Harrison's care, his cough diminishing daily until it was barely more than an occasional throat clearing. He took over more of the ranch work, insisting Clara needed time to focus on her dress. "A ball with Wesley Grant," John said, with obvious satisfaction. "Clara, do you understand what this means? He's declaring his intentions publicly. That's serious." "I know, Papa. That's what scares me." "Don't be scared. Be excited. This is your chance at real happiness, girl. Don't let fear steal it from you." Saturday arrived with Clara's nerves stretched thin as wire. She dressed in her brown wool again, her only option for town, and attempted the same elaborate hairstyle that had worked the previous week. This time it came together more easily, and when she studied herself in the small mirror, she saw a woman who looked almost pretty. Not beautiful like the society ladies, but presentable at least. Wesley arrived at 10 o'clock, riding a handsome black gelding and leading a gentle gray mare. "Thought you might prefer riding to taking the wagon," he explained. "Faster and more comfortable for conversation." Clara hadn't ridden for pleasure in years. Horses were working animals on their small ranch, not recreation. But she accepted the offer, mounting the gray mare with practiced ease. The ride into Salt Lake City took 2 hours, and they spent it talking easily about everything and nothing. Wesley told her about his childhood growing up on a much smaller ranch, how his father had built the business through careful decisions and hard work. Clara shared memories of her mother, stories she rarely told anyone because they hurt too much. By the time they reached the city, Clara felt more comfortable with Wesley than she'd felt with anyone except her father. There was an ease between them that seemed to transcend the short time they'd known each other. Thornton's Mercantile was crowded when they arrived, but this time Clara didn't flinch from the curious stares. Wesley kept close to her side, his presence a shield against any potential cruelty. "Miss Whitmore," Mr. Thornton greeted them warmly. "And Mr. Grant, what can I help you with today?" "We need fabric for a dress," Wesley said. "Something suitable for the Founders' Day ball. Your finest quality, please." Mr. Thornton's eyebrows rose, but his smile was genuine. "Of course. I have several new silks that just arrived from San Francisco, and some beautiful wool blends that would be perfect for the season. Right this way." He led them to the fabric counter where bolt after bolt of gorgeous material awaited. Clara's breath caught at the colors and textures: deep burgundy silk, emerald wool with silver thread, midnight blue satin that seemed to glow in the light. "This one." Wesley's hand hovered over a bolt of fabric in a color Clara couldn't quite name, somewhere between gold and bronze, with subtle copper threads woven throughout that caught the light. "What do you think, Clara?" She touched it reverently. The fabric was soft as water, flowing through her fingers like liquid metal. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "It's too expensive," she whispered. Mr. Thornton checked the tag. $4 a yard, and you'd need at least 6 yards for a ball gown. $24. Clara's entire ranch budget for a month. "I'll take 8 yards, Wesley said. "And matching thread. And whatever notions Miss Whitmore needs." "Wesley, no." "Clara." He turned to face her fully. "Let me do this, please. Not because you can't afford it yourself, but because I want to. Because seeing you in that color, it'll match your eyes in the firelight, bring out the gold in your hair. It'll be worth every penny just to see you shine." Clara felt tears threaten. "This is too much." "It's not nearly enough." His voice was soft but firm. "You deserve beautiful things, Clara. You deserve to walk into that ball feeling confident and lovely. Let me give you that." She looked at the fabric again, imagining herself in a dress made from something so fine. Imagining walking into the Founders' Day ball, not as the mocked ranch girl, but as Wesley Grant's chosen companion. "All right," she whispered. "Thank you." Mr. Thornton measured and cut the fabric with obvious pleasure, adding matching silk thread, tiny pearl buttons, and delicate lace for trim, all of which Wesley insisted on purchasing despite Clara's protests. As they left the Mercantile, packages wrapped carefully in brown paper, Clara noticed several women watching them with undisguised curiosity. One of them was Dorothy Chen, who'd participated in mocking Clara's dress weeks ago. Dorothy's eyes widened when she saw Wesley carrying Clara's packages, when she noticed how close they walked together, how comfortable they seemed in each other's company. "Good afternoon, Miss Chen," Wesley said pleasantly, tipping his hat. Dorothy managed a weak smile. "Mr. Grant," Miss Whitmore. The acknowledgement, using Clara's name with respect rather than mockery, felt like victory. They ate dinner at the hotel restaurant where Wesley was clearly well known. The maitre d' showed them to a prime table, and several other diners nodded respectfully to Wesley, their eyes sliding curiously to Clara. "They're wondering who you are," Wesley said with amusement, watching her notice the attention. "I'm nobody. You're the woman I'm courting. That makes you somebody." He reached across the table and took her hand. "And in 3 weeks, when we walk into that ball together, everyone will know it." Clara's heart hammered. This was really happening. Wesley Grant, one of the richest men in 3 counties, was publicly claiming her as his choice. "What if I embarrass you?" she asked quietly. "I don't know how to dance properly. I've never been to anything fancier than a church social." "Then we'll practice." Wesley's smile was warm. "I'll teach you to waltz. It's not complicated. Just follow my lead and trust me not to let you fall." The ride home was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. Clara held her packages carefully, already planning the dress in her mind. She'd never made anything so elaborate, but she'd sewn since childhood. She could do this. She would do this, and she would make Wesley proud. When they reached the ranch, Wesley helped her dismount and carried her packages to the porch. "Next Sunday?" he asked. "Next Sunday," Clara confirmed. "And Wesley, thank you for everything, the fabric, the dinner, just for seeing me. Always." He touched her cheek gently, his calloused thumb tracing a soft line along her jaw. "You're all I see, Clara. Remember that." He rode away into the dusk, and Clara stood on the porch holding her packages until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely into the mountain silence. Inside, John was waiting with obvious curiosity. When Clara showed him the fabric, his eyes widened. "That man is serious about you, Clara girl. Dead serious." "I know." Clara touched the beautiful material reverently. "Papa, I think I might be falling in love with him." John pulled her into a hug, his thin arms surprisingly strong. "Then fall, sweetheart. Fall and trust that he'll catch you. Because, from what I've seen, that man would move mountains to make sure you never hit the ground." That night, Clara spread the bronze gold fabric across her bed and began planning the most important dress she'd ever make. Not because it was for a fancy ball, but because it was for the moment when she'd step into Wesley's world and show everyone, including herself, that she belonged there. The following morning, Clara woke before dawn with the bronze gold fabric occupying her thoughts. She'd lain awake half the night mentally constructing the dress, calculating measurements, envisioning seams, planning each detail with the precision she usually reserved for ranch work. Now, with pale winter light just beginning to seep through her window, she rose and lit the lamp, spreading the fabric across her small table to study it properly. The material seemed to glow even in the dim lamplight, the copper threads catching and holding the flame's reflection like captured stars. Clara had sewn her entire life, practical garments meant for work and durability. But this was different. This required artistry she wasn't sure she possessed. "You'll figure it out," she whispered to herself, running her fingers over the silk. "You have to." Over the next 2 weeks, the dress became Clara's obsession. She worked on it every spare moment, cutting the pattern with painstaking care, basting seams that she adjusted and readjusted until they lay perfectly, hand-stitching the delicate lace trim with fingers that cramped from the fine work. The dress took shape slowly, emerging from chaos into something that made Clara's breath catch every time she held it up to the light. Wesley visited both Sundays as promised, and each visit deepened what was growing between them. He brought books about cattle management that he thought might help their small herd. He spent hours with John discussing orchard expansion, offering advice without condescension, listening to John's ideas with genuine interest. He fixed a section of fence that had been giving Clara trouble, insisting it wasn't charity but simply what neighbors did for each other. But it was the small moments that Clara treasured most. The way Wesley's eyes softened when he looked at her. The brush of his hand against hers when he helped her carry water from the well. The evening he stayed late and they sat on the porch watching stars emerge, talking about everything and nothing until the cold drove them inside. The way he made her laugh with stories about stubborn cattle and ornery horses, his voice animated and his smile quick. On the second Sunday, after dinner when John had gone to rest, Wesley took Clara's hand and led her to the cleared space in front of the fireplace. Time for your first dance lesson, he announced. Wesley, I don't think... Trust me. He positioned her right hand on his shoulder, took her left hand in his, and placed his other hand carefully at her waist. The waltz is simple. It's just a box pattern. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Like this. He began to move, counting softly, guiding her through the steps. Clara stumbled at first, stepping on his feet and apologizing profusely, but Wesley just laughed and patiently started again. Don't look at your feet, he instructed gently. Look at me. Trust that I'll guide you where you need to go. Clara raised her eyes to his, and suddenly the steps came easier. There was something in Wesley's gaze, steadiness and warmth and complete confidence in her, that made her believe she could do this impossible thing. They danced in the small room with no music except Wesley's counting and the crackle of the fire, and it was the most romantic thing Clara had ever experienced. When they finally stopped, both slightly breathless, Wesley didn't immediately release her. You're a natural, he said softly, his face close to hers. I stepped on your feet at least 6 times. I didn't notice. His thumb traced a small circle on her waist, and Clara felt the touch like fire through the fabric of her dress. Clara, I need to tell you something. Her heart stuttered. What? I'm falling in love with you. The words were simple, direct, honest. Actually, I think I've already fallen. I think I fell that first day in the mercantile, maybe even before that. And I know it's fast and maybe I shouldn't say it yet, but I can't keep pretending what I feel is anything less than love. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She should be careful, should protect herself, should remember all the reasons this couldn't possibly work. But standing there in Wesley's arms, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, feeling the absolute rightness of this moment, caution seemed impossible. I'm falling too, she whispered. I'm terrified, and it seems impossible, but I'm falling. Wesley's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, his eyes never leaving hers. Then we'll fall together, he said, and we'll figure out the impossible part as we go. The week before the ball arrived with startling speed, Clara finished the dress on Thursday evening, working by lamplight to attach the final pearl buttons. When she finally held it up complete, she couldn't quite believe she'd created something so beautiful. The bronze gold silk caught the light like liquid metal, the fitted bodice and flowing skirt exactly as she'd envisioned. The lace trim at the neckline and sleeves added elegance without overwhelming the fabric's natural beauty. Let me see it on, John insisted. So Clara retreated to her room and carefully pulled on the dress. It fit perfectly. She'd measured and adjusted so many times that every seam lay exactly right. The color did what Wesley had predicted, bringing out the gold in her brown hair and making her skin seem to glow. When she emerged, John's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Clara girl, your mother would be so proud. You look like a princess. I look like me in an expensive dress, Clara corrected, but she couldn't stop smiling. You look like a woman in love, John said gently, and that's the most beautiful thing any dress could showcase. Friday brought another letter from Wesley, this one more formal than his previous correspondence. Clara, it read, I'll arrive at 5 o'clock Saturday evening to collect you for the ball. The event begins at 7, but I thought we might arrive a bit late. Make an entrance, as they say. I want everyone to see you walk in on my arm, to know without question that you're the woman I've chosen. I have something for you, a gift I hope you'll accept. My mother left me several pieces of jewelry, and there's one in particular I think would be perfect with your new dress. It would honor me if you'd wear it. I can hardly sleep for anticipation of seeing you tomorrow night. Until then, I remain completely yours. Wesley. Clara read the letter 3 times, her heart racing at the phrase, the woman I've chosen. This was real. This was happening. In less than 24 hours, she would walk into the most important social event of the season on the arm of one of the territory's most eligible men. Saturday dawned clear and bitterly cold, the kind of December day where breath froze in the air and frost painted every surface silver. Clara spent the morning on routine chores, trying to keep busy so she wouldn't obsess over the evening ahead. She fed the livestock, collected eggs, checked the water troughs, normal tasks that helped ground her when her thoughts threatened to spiral into anxiety. By afternoon, she'd run out of work to distract herself. She bathed in the big copper tub by the fire, using the last of her lavender soap, washing her hair twice until it shone. She sat by the fire to dry it, running a brush through the long strands until they gleamed with reddish highlights she'd never noticed before. At 4 o'clock, John made himself scarce, claiming he needed to check on something in the barn. Clara suspected he simply wanted to give her privacy to prepare. She dressed with trembling hands, pulling on the best chemise and petticoat she owned before carefully stepping into the bronze gold dress. The silk whispered against her skin, a sensation so foreign and luxurious that she almost couldn't believe it was meant for her. She fastened the pearl buttons with fumbling fingers, adjusted the lace at her neckline, smoothed the skirt until it fell in perfect folds. Then came her hair. Clara had practiced several styles over the past week, finally settling on an elegant twist pinned with the few good hairpins she owned, with soft tendrils framing her face. It wasn't as elaborate as what a professional lady's maid might achieve, but it was refined and pretty, making her look older and more sophisticated. She was just finishing when she heard hoofbeats approach. Her heart leaped into her throat. Through the window, she saw Wesley dismount, and her breath caught. He wore a black suit with a crisp white shirt and silver brocade vest, his dark hair carefully combed, his boots polished to a mirror shine. He looked like he belonged in a painting, like something too fine for their simple ranch yard. But when John let him in and Wesley's eyes found Clara, the expression on his face made her feel like the finest thing in existence. Clara. Her name came out rough, almost reverent. "You're absolutely stunning." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's the dress, the fabric you chose. It's you." Wesley moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. "The dress is beautiful, but you're what makes it extraordinary." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I brought this for you. It was my mother's." Clara opened the box with shaking hands and gasped. Inside lay a delicate gold chain with a single pearl pendant, simple, elegant, perfect. "Wesley, I can't accept—" "You can, and you will." His voice was gentle but firm. "My mother wore this on her wedding day. She left it to me with instructions to give it to a woman worthy of it, someone with integrity and kindness and strength. Clara, that's you. You're exactly who she would have wanted wearing this." Tears blurred Clara's vision. "Your mother's wedding necklace?" "May I?" Wesley took the necklace from the box and moved behind her. Clara felt his fingers brush her neck as he fastened the clasp, the touch sending shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with cold. The pearl settled just above the lace of her neckline, catching the lamplight and glowing softly. "Perfect," Wesley murmured, his hands resting briefly on her shoulders. "Absolutely perfect." John cleared his throat from the doorway. "You two should leave soon if you want to arrive fashionably late." "Right." Wesley seemed to shake himself from a daze. "Clara, are you ready?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Wesley helped her into her heavy wool cloak, shabby compared to the dress underneath, but necessary against the freezing night air. He offered his arm and she took it, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric. "Don't wait up, Papa," Clara called. "Wasn't planning to." John's eyes twinkled. "Have a wonderful time, Clara girl. You deserve this." The ride to Salt Lake City passed in a blur. Wesley had brought a closed carriage rather than horses, claiming he didn't want Clara's dress damaged by the cold. Inside, wrapped in blankets with heated bricks at their feet, they talked quietly about everything and nothing. Wesley held her hand the entire way, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her palm that made concentration difficult. "Nervous?" he asked as the city lights came into view. "Terrified," Clara admitted. "Don't be. You're going to be the most beautiful woman there, and I'm going to be the luckiest man. Everyone else can think what they want. I only care that you enjoy yourself." The Grand Assembly Hall blazed with light, every window glowing against the dark winter night. Carriages lined the street, depositing elegantly dressed couples who climbed the steps in waves of silk and jewels and expensive cologne. Music drifted from inside, a full orchestra playing something grand and complicated. Clara's hands began to shake again. "Look at me," Wesley commanded softly. When she did, he smiled. "Just stay close to me. Dance with me. Let me introduce you to people who matter. Ignore anyone who's cruel because they're not worth your time or attention. Can you do that?" I'll try. That's all I ask. He squeezed her hand. Ready? Clara took a deep breath and nodded. Wesley helped her from the carriage and offered his arm. Clara placed her hand on his sleeve, feeling the expensive fabric of his suit coat, and together they climbed the steps to the Grand Assembly Hall. The moment they entered, conversation rippled and died like a stone dropped in still water. Every head turned, every eye fixed on them. On Wesley Grant, one of the territory's most powerful men, and on Clara Whitmore, the ranch girl in the bronze gold dress that caught the chandelier light and made her seem to glow. Clara heard whispers, felt the weight of hundreds of gazes, and fought the urge to turn and flee. But Wesley's hand covered hers on his arm, warm and steady and completely confident. He led her into the ballroom like she was visiting royalty, his head high and his expression daring anyone to question his choice. Margaret Fairchild stood near the refreshment table, her mouth slightly open in shock. Susan Hartford clutched her husband's arm, her eyes wide and disbelieving. Dorothy Chen stared openly, taking in every detail of Clara's transformation from mocked ranch girl to Wesley Grant's chosen companion. "Mr. Grant!" The mayor himself approached, hand extended in greeting. "Good to see you. And who is this lovely young lady?" "Mayor Billings, may I present Miss Clara Whitmore. Clara, this is Mayor George Billings and his wife Martha." "Whitmore." The mayor's brow furrowed. "The apple orchard Whitmore? Your father's John Whitmore." "Yes, sir." Clara found her voice, keeping it steady through sheer force of will. "Excellent apples. My wife makes preserves from them every fall, best in the territory." He turned to his wife. "Martha, you remember the Whitmore apples?" Martha Billings smiled warmly. "Of course. Miss Whitmore, your father has quite a gift for cultivation. You must give him our regards." "I will, thank you." As the mayor and his wife moved on, more people approached, drawn by curiosity or genuine interest or simple social obligation. Wesley introduced Clara to everyone with obvious pride, never rushing, always making sure she felt included in the conversation. Some people were openly curious. Others were coolly polite. A few, including several ranchers who knew John's reputation, were genuinely warm. Through it all, Clara held her head high and remembered she was John Whitmore's daughter, raised to work hard, speak honestly, and never apologize for who she was. "Would you like to dance?" Wesley asked after nearly an hour of introductions. "I'm still not very good," Clara warned. "Neither is anyone else here. They're just better at faking it." He grinned and led her onto the dance floor just as the orchestra struck up a waltz. Wesley took her in his arms exactly as he had during their practice sessions, and suddenly the crowded ballroom full of watching strangers didn't matter. There was only the music and Wesley's steady lead and the feeling of floating across the polished floor. "You're doing beautifully," Wesley murmured. "I haven't stepped on your feet once." "I noticed." His smile was warm. "Though honestly, I wouldn't care if you did. This right here, dancing with you in that dress with everyone watching and knowing you're mine, this is the best moment I've had in years." "Yours?" Clara's heart stuttered. "If you'll have me." Wesley's eyes were serious now. "Clara, I know we've only been courting for a few weeks. I know by conventional standards it's too soon to speak of serious intentions. But I've never been one for convention, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The music swelled around them as they turned across the floor. "I want to marry you," Wesley said quietly. The words meant only for her. "Not right now. I'll court you properly, give you time to be sure. But I need you to know that's where this is heading for me. You're not a passing fancy or a charitable impulse. You're the woman I want to build a life with." Clara missed a step, stumbled slightly, but Wesley caught her easily and kept them moving. "You want to marry me?" She couldn't quite process the words. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build our ranches into something even better than they are separately. I want to eat your apple pie for the rest of my life and argue with you about cattle management and grow old watching our orchards bear fruit year after year." He paused. "If that sounds appealing to you." "Wesley, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything yet. Just know that I'm serious, that this isn't temporary or uncertain for me, that I see a future, our future, very clearly." The waltz ended, and another began immediately, but Wesley didn't release her. They kept dancing as Clara's mind raced. marriage. To Wesley Grant, a future that included not just survival, but actual joy, partnership, love. A life where she wouldn't be alone carrying the weight of the ranch and her father's health. A life with someone who saw her and valued her and wanted to build something together. It should have seemed impossible, and yet, held in Wesley's arms while music swirled around them and the bronze gold dress caught the light with every turn, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I could see it too," Clara whispered. "That future, with you." Wesley's smile was incandescent. He pulled her slightly closer, still proper but unmistakably intimate, and they danced through 2 more songs before finally leaving the floor. The evening passed in a blur of conversation and dancing and small triumphs. Several ranchers sought Clara out specifically to discuss her father's cultivation techniques, treating her like an expert rather than dismissing her as merely a woman. One older lady, the wife of a railway director, spent 20 minutes discussing agricultural economics with Clara and seemed genuinely impressed by her knowledge. Margaret Fairchild approached near midnight, her face stiff with forced politeness. "Miss Whitmore, you look very nice this evening." "Thank you, Mrs. Fairchild." Clara kept her voice neutral and her spine straight. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior in the mercantile. It was uncharitable." The words came out stilted, clearly rehearsed. "I hope you can forgive the incident." Clara studied the woman's face and saw not genuine remorse but social expediency. Margaret was apologizing because Wesley Grant's chosen companion deserved respect, not because she actually regretted her cruelty. "I appreciate the apology," Clara said carefully. "Perhaps in the future we might treat all people with dignity, regardless of their clothing or circumstances." Margaret's face flushed, but she nodded stiffly and retreated. Wesley, who'd witnessed the exchange from a few feet away, caught Clara's eye and winked. As midnight approached, Wesley suggested they step outside for air. Clara gratefully accepted. The ballroom had grown hot and stuffy, with so many bodies and so much nervous energy. The night air hit like a slap of ice, but it was refreshing after the overheated hall. They stood on the wide veranda overlooking the city, their breath fogging in the lamplight. "You were magnificent tonight," Wesley said, turning to face her. "The way you handled everyone, the curiosity, the judgment, Margaret's pathetic apology, you were graceful and dignified and absolutely yourself. I'm so proud of you. I kept thinking I'd embarrass you, say something wrong, or use the wrong fork, or you were perfect." He took both her hands in his. "Clara, do you understand what tonight meant? I claimed you publicly, in front of everyone who matters in this territory. I declared that you're the woman I've chosen. There's no taking that back now, no changing course. You're stuck with me. And you're stuck with me, a ranch girl who still doesn't know which fork to use." I couldn't be happier about it. Wesley lifted her hands to his lips, kissing first one, then the other. "Though I should probably tell you something." "What?" "I have no idea which fork to use either. I just copy whatever the person next to me does and hope for the best." Clara laughed, a real, genuine laugh that echoed across the quiet veranda. "You're ridiculous. I'm in love with you. Same thing, really." The words hung in the cold air between them, precious and terrifying and absolutely true. "I love you too," Clara said, and felt something click into place in her chest, like a door she hadn't known was locked suddenly swinging open. "I love you, Wesley Grant, and it's the most terrifying and wonderful thing I've ever felt." Wesley pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her despite the impropriety of such public affection. Clara buried her face in his chest and felt his heart hammering against her cheek. "We're going to be so happy," Wesley murmured into her hair. "I promise you, Clara. I'm going to spend every day making sure you never regret taking a chance on me. I don't think I could regret this even if I tried." They stood there holding each other while the music drifted from inside and the winter stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Clara thought about the path that had led her here, the mockery and the mercantile, the fear and uncertainty, the gradual building of trust and affection, and finally love. She thought about Wesley's steady presence in her life, the way he'd seen past her worn dress to the person underneath, the way he'd defended her and courted her and chosen her despite having every other option available. "Wesley?" she said softly. "Hmm?" When you ask my father for permission to marry me, and I assume that's coming soon given what you said earlier, the answer is going to be yes, just so you know. From both of us. She felt him smile against her hair. Good to know, though I'm still going to court you properly first. Another month at least. Give you time to be absolutely certain. I'm already certain. So am I. But your father raised you to be careful and thoughtful, and I want to respect that. I want to do this right, not just for propriety's sake, but because you deserve to be courted like you matter, like you're precious, because you are. Clara pulled back just enough to look up at him. Has anyone ever told you you're too good to be true? Frequently. I ignore them. He smiled and touched her cheek gently. Come on, let's go back inside for one more dance, and then I'll take you home before your father thinks I've kidnapped you. They danced one final waltz, and this time Clara didn't stumble once. She moved with Wesley like they'd been dancing together for years, perfectly in sync, perfectly matched. Around them she felt eyes watching, some jealous, some approving, some simply curious. But none of it mattered because Wesley was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. When the music ended, he bowed formally and she curtsied, and scattered applause rippled through the watching crowd. Wesley offered his arm, and they made their way toward the exit, stopping occasionally to bid farewell to various acquaintances. The carriage ride home was quiet and comfortable, Clara's head resting on Wesley's shoulder while he held her hand. She was exhausted but happy, her feet aching from dancing and her face tired from smiling, but her heart fuller than she'd known it could be. Thank you, she said as their ranch came into view. For tonight, for everything, for seeing me. Always, Wesley promised. For the rest of our lives, I'll always see you. John was still awake when they arrived, sitting by the fire with one of the orchard books Wesley had given them. He looked up when they entered, and his eyes went immediately to Clara's glowing face. I take it the evening went well? It was perfect, Papa. Clara sank into a chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Everyone was, well, most people were kind, and I didn't embarrass myself or Wesley. You could never embarrass me, Wesley said firmly. Mr. Whitmore, I should probably head back. It's late and I have business tomorrow, but I'll be back next Sunday, if that's acceptable. Of course. John stood and shook Wesley's hand. Thank you for taking such good care of my daughter. It's my honor, sir. At the door, Wesley turned back to Clara. Keep the necklace. It looks like it was made for you. Clara's hand flew to the pearl at her throat. Wesley, I can't keep something so precious. You're more precious. The necklace is yours now. He smiled. Dream about me? Probably, Clara admitted, blushing. Good. Because I'll definitely be dreaming about you in that dress. He tipped his hat. Good night, Clara, Mr. Whitmore. After he left, Clara sat by the fire with her father and told him everything, every moment, every conversation, every wonderful detail. She told him about Wesley's proposal of marriage, about her own certainty, about the feeling of rightness that had settled into her bones. John listened with shining eyes, and when she finished, he pulled her into a tight hug. Your mother would be so happy, he said thickly. She always worried about leaving you alone to care for me, about you giving up your chance at a family of your own. But Clara, girl, you found someone extraordinary, someone who deserves you. I love him, Papa. I know, sweetheart, and he clearly loves you. That's all that matters, that you found someone who sees your worth and treasures it. John pulled back and smiled through tears. Now go to bed before you fall asleep in that expensive dress. We'll talk more tomorrow. Clara climbed the stairs to her small room and carefully removed the bronze gold dress, hanging it with reverence. She touched the pearl necklace at her throat and smiled, remembering Wesley's mother had worn it on her wedding day. Someday soon, Clara would wear it on hers. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a warm certainty that spread from her chest to her fingertips. She was going to marry Wesley Grant. She was going to build a life with him, merge their ranches, grow old beside him. And for the first time since her mother died, Clara let herself believe in happy endings. The weeks following the Founders' Day ball passed in a golden haze of happiness that Clara kept expecting to shatter but never did. Wesley visited every Sunday without fail, arriving precisely at noon and staying until the stars emerged. But now he also came on Wednesdays, claiming he needed to check on orchard business, though they all knew the real reason. and sometimes he appeared unexpectedly on Fridays, bringing supplies from town or simply showing up because, as he told Clara with endearing honesty, he couldn't wait until Sunday to see her again. With each visit, the future they'd spoken of at the ball became more tangible, more real. Wesley brought architectural drawings for expanding the orchards, detailed plans showing how they could integrate the Whitmore property with sections of his own land. He and John spent hours discussing irrigation systems and grafting techniques, their conversations growing more animated as the vision took shape. But it was the small moments Clara treasured most. Wesley teaching her to play chess by the fire while snow fell outside. The way he'd catch her hand as they walked through the orchard, lacing their fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. The evening he stayed for dinner and ended up helping her wash dishes, his expensive shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, laughing as soap bubbles flew everywhere. "This isn't very romantic," Clara said, scrubbing a pot while Wesley dried plates. "This is exactly romantic," Wesley countered. "This is real life, Clara. This is what marriage looks like, doing mundane things together and somehow finding joy in them." Dr. Harrison visited twice more to check on John, pronouncing himself satisfied with the recovery. The bronchitis had cleared completely, leaving John stronger than he'd been in months. He'd gained back the weight he'd lost. The color had returned to his face, and most importantly, the light had returned to his eyes. "You've given me my life back," John told Wesley during one Sunday dinner. Not just the medicine, though that helped, but giving Clara someone to share her burdens. She's been carrying too much alone for too long. "She won't be alone anymore," Wesley promised. "That's a vow I'm making to both of you." As January gave way to February, Wesley began pressing gently about setting a date. They were sitting on the porch one unusually warm Sunday afternoon, wrapped in blankets and watching the mountains turn pink in the sunset, when he broached the subject again. "Clara, I've been thinking about spring." "What about it?" "How the apple trees will bloom in April. How beautiful the orchard will be with all those white flowers against the mountains." He paused. "How perfect it would be to get married then." Clara's breath caught. They talked about marriage in abstract terms. Someday, eventually, when the time was right. But Wesley was making it concrete, giving it a date and a season. "April," she repeated softly. "I know it's soon. We'll have only been courting 4 months, but Clara, I'm 30 years old and I've waited my whole life to feel like this. Now that I've found you, waiting seems pointless." He took her hand. "But if you need more time, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need." Clara thought about the past months, about how Wesley had proven himself over and over, not just with grand gestures, but with consistent daily demonstrations of who he was. He'd shown up when he said he would. He'd treated her father with genuine respect. He'd defended her publicly and courted her honorably and made her feel valued in ways she'd never imagined possible. "I don't need more time," she said. "I know who you are, Wesley. I know what you're offering. And I want it. I want you more than I've ever wanted anything." Wesley's smile was brilliant. "So, April. We could plan for mid-April, after the worst of the winter weather, but when the trees are just starting to bloom." "April," Clara agreed and felt her future click into place with satisfying certainty. The next Sunday, Wesley arrived with John's favorite whiskey and an unusually serious expression. After dinner, he cleared his throat and looked across the table at John with obvious nervousness. "Mr. Whitmore, there's something I need to ask you formally." John set down his coffee cup, his eyes twinkling. "I wondered when this was coming." "Sir, I love your daughter. I want to marry her, build a life with her, care for her for the rest of my days." Wesley's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed his anxiety. "I'm asking for your blessing, and her hand in marriage." The silence stretched for a long moment, while John studied Wesley's face. Clara held her breath, even though she knew what her father's answer would be. "Do you understand what you're taking on?" John asked finally. "Clara's strong and capable, but she's also stubborn as a mule when she thinks she's right. She works herself too hard and doesn't ask for help even when she needs it. She'll argue with you about cattle management and orchard cultivation and probably every other decision you make together." "I'm counting on it," Wesley said. "I don't want someone who just agrees with me. I want a partner who challenges me to be better. And this ranch, our small operation compared to your empire, you're not doing this out of charity?" "Sir," your daughter and this ranch are the best things that have ever happened to me. I'm the one getting the better end of this arrangement." Wesley leaned forward. "Mr. Whitmore, I promise you I will spend every day of my life making sure Clara never regrets choosing me. I'll honor her, protect her, support her dreams, and build a future worthy of her. That's my vow to you." John's eyes had grown suspiciously bright. "Then you have my blessing, son, and my gratitude for seeing what a treasure my daughter is." Wesley released a breath he'd clearly been holding. "Thank you, sir. That means everything. Though I should warn you," John added with a slight smile, "she's still got to say yes herself. I've given my blessing, but the choice is hers." They both turned to look at Clara, who'd been watching the exchange with tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Of course, yes." As if there was ever any doubt. Wesley was out of his chair in an instant, pulling Clara to her feet and into his arms. She felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt his breath catch as he held her tight. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "So much, Clara. More than I have words to express." "I love you too." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "When did you want to do this? April still?" "April 15th, Wesley said immediately, clearly having given this considerable thought. "That gives us 2 months to plan. We'll have the ceremony here, in the orchard under the blooming trees. Something simple but beautiful. Family and close friends only." "I'd like that," Clara said. "Nothing fancy or elaborate, just us and the people who matter." "Perfect." Wesley kissed her forehead, then seemed to remember something. "Wait here." He went out to his horse and returned carrying a small velvet box, different from the one that had held his mother's necklace. When he opened it, Clara gasped. Inside lay a simple gold band with a small diamond, not ostentatious or showy, but beautiful in its understated elegance. "It was my grandmother's," Wesley explained. "She was a ranch woman, too, worked alongside my grandfather building their spread from nothing." "She would have loved you, Clara. Would have recognized a kindred spirit." He took the ring from the box and held it poised at her finger. "Clara Whitmore, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," Clara breathed. "Yes to all of it." Wesley slid the ring onto her finger where it settled like it had been made for her. Clara held her hand up to the lamplight, watching the small diamond catch the glow, and felt the weight of the promise it represented. This was real. This was happening. In 2 months she would become Clara Grant, and her life would change in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Clara had assumed a simple wedding would require little work, but she'd underestimated the sheer number of details involved. There were invitations to write, food to plan, the house to prepare for guests, a wedding dress to make. Wesley insisted on hiring help for the heavy work, ranch hands to repair fencing and paint the barn, women from town to help with cooking and decorating. Clara protested at first, pride making her want to do everything herself, but Wesley was firm. "You're not going into our marriage exhausted from preparation," he said. "Let people help. That's what community is for." He was right, Clara discovered. Once word spread that Wesley Grant was marrying Clara Whitmore in an orchard wedding, offers of help poured in from unexpected sources. The mayor's wife sent her cook to help plan the menu. Several ranchers Wesley did business with offered to provide beef and pork for the celebration dinner. Even Margaret Fairchild sent a note offering her china and silver for the reception, though Clara politely declined that particular offer. The wedding dress proved the biggest challenge. Clara wanted to make it herself. Something about creating the dress she'd marry Wesley in felt important, symbolic. But the bronze gold ball gown had used all her skills, and a wedding dress required even more delicacy. Wesley solved the problem by bringing a seamstress from Salt Lake City, Mrs. Chen, Dorothy Chen's mother, who turned out to be warm and kind, unlike her daughter. She taught Clara advanced techniques, helped her select perfect white silk, and guided her through creating a dress that was simple but elegant, with fitted sleeves, a modest neckline, and tiny pearl buttons down the back. "You have real talent," Mrs. Chen said during one fitting, adjusting the hem. "If you ever wanted to work as a seamstress, I could find you clients." "I'm going to be rather busy being a rancher's wife," Clara said with a smile. "But thank you." As April approached, the wedding plans solidified. They'd hold the ceremony at 2 in the afternoon under the apple trees, which should be in full bloom by mid-April. Wesley's ranch foreman would stand as his best man. Clara asked Sarah, the neighbor woman who'd helped her mother through difficult births years ago, to stand with her. They'd have a simple reception afterward with dinner, dancing, and celebration. Wesley was building them a house on a piece of land that bordered both properties, close enough to John that Clara could check on him daily, but separate enough to give them privacy as newlyweds. He'd shown Clara the plans, incorporating her suggestions about kitchen layout and window placement, insisting this was their house, not just his. "I want you to love it," he'd said. "I want you to walk through that door and feel like you're home." On April 1st, 2 weeks before the wedding, Wesley took Clara to see the nearly completed house. They rode together in comfortable silence, Clara's head resting against his shoulder, both of them lost in thoughts about the future. The house was beautiful, not ostentatious, but solid and well-built with large windows facing the mountains and a wide porch perfect for watching sunsets. Inside, the rooms were spacious and bright, with a kitchen that made Clara gasp with its modern convenience and a bedroom with windows overlooking the orchard. "Oh, Wesley," she breathed, walking through the empty rooms. "It's perfect." "Wait until you see this." He led her to a small room off the main hallway. "I thought this could be your sewing room. Natural light from 3 directions, space for a large table, shelves for fabric, and supplies." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You made me a sewing room? You love creating things. You should have a space that's entirely yours to do it." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What's mine is yours, Clara, including the right to claim space for your own interests and dreams." She turned in his arms and kissed him, the first real kiss they'd shared beyond chaste pecks on the cheek. Wesley made a sound of surprise but immediately responded, pulling her closer and deepening the kiss until Clara's knees went weak and her head spun. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wesley rested his forehead against hers. "2 more weeks," he murmured. "2 more weeks and you'll be my wife." "I can't wait," Clara whispered back. The final days before the wedding passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. The weather cooperated beautifully. Warm spring days that coaxed the apple trees into spectacular bloom, carpeting the orchard in white and pink flowers that looked like snow had returned. The night before the wedding, Wesley came for a final dinner at the Whitmore Ranch. Tradition said he shouldn't see Clara the day of the ceremony, so this would be their goodbye until she walked down the aisle tomorrow. After dinner, they sat on the porch watching stars emerge, holding hands and talking quietly about nothing in particular. Finally, Wesley stood to leave, pulling Clara up with him. "This is the last time I'll say goodnight to Clara Whitmore," he said softly. "Tomorrow, you'll be Clara Grant." "I'm a little terrified," Clara admitted. "Of marrying me? Of being this happy? Of having something this good? I keep waiting for it to fall apart." Wesley cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her cheeks. "It's not going to fall apart. This is real and solid and built to last. Tomorrow we're making promises in front of everyone who matters, and those promises are going to hold for the rest of our lives." "I believe you," Clara said, and realized she truly did. "I love you," Wesley said. "I'll love you tomorrow when you walk toward me in your wedding dress. I'll love you 50 years from now when we're old and gray. I'll love you every single day in between. That's my promise." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." Wesley kissed her gently, a promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Then he mounted his horse and rode away into the darkness, leaving Clara standing on the porch with her heart so full she thought it might burst. April 15th dawned clear and perfect, the sky so blue it hurt to look at, and the mountains still snow-capped against the horizon. Clara woke early, too excited to sleep, and found her father already awake making coffee. "Big day, Clara girl," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "The biggest," Clara agreed. Sarah arrived at 9 to help Clara prepare. She styled Clara's hair in an elaborate updo with flowers woven through, applied subtle color to Clara's cheeks and lips, and helped her into the white silk wedding dress that fit perfectly. When Clara finally looked at herself in the full-length mirror Sarah had brought, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress transformed her, making her look elegant and refined. The updo showcased her face, highlighting features she'd never thought particularly pretty. But it was the expression that really made the difference. The joy radiating from her eyes, the smile that wouldn't fade, the glow of a woman deeply in love. "You're beautiful," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "Your mother would be so proud." John appeared in the doorway and stopped dead, his own eyes filling. "Oh, sweetheart, you look just like her, just like your mother on our wedding day." Clara crossed to him and took his hands. "Thank you, Papa, for raising me, for loving me, for being strong when Mama died, for letting Wesley into our lives and supporting us." "You've given me more joy than any father deserves," John said thickly, "and now I'm giving you to a man who'll treasure you the way you deserve. That's all I ever wanted for you, Clara girl, to be cherished." At 1:30, guests began arriving. Wesley's ranch hands and their families, neighboring ranchers, people from town who'd watched Clara grow up, even Dr. Harrison and his wife. They gathered in the orchard where chairs had been set up in neat rows facing a simple arch woven with apple blossoms. At precisely 2 o'clock, the small string quartet Wesley had hired began playing. Clara, standing at the edge of the orchard with her father's arm linked through hers, took a deep breath. "Ready?" John asked. "So ready," Clara said. They stepped into view, and every head turned. Clara heard gasps, heard whispered compliments, but her eyes went immediately to Wesley standing under the arch in a black suit with white apple blossoms in his lapel. The moment their gazes locked, his entire face transformed with such joy that Clara felt answering happiness surge through her chest. The walk down the aisle seemed both endless and too short. Finally, they reached the arch, and John placed Clara's hand in Wesley's. "Take care of my girl," John said. "With my life," Wesley promised. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. The minister spoke about love and partnership, about two lives becoming one, about the commitment they were making before God and community. Clara barely heard the words, too focused on Wesley's face, on the way his hands trembled slightly, holding hers, on the absolute certainty in his eyes. "Do you, Wesley Grant, take Clara Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Wesley said firmly, his voice carrying across the orchard. "And do you, Clara Whitmore, take Wesley Grant to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Clara looked into Wesley's eyes, these eyes that had first truly seen her, that had looked past her worn dress to the woman underneath, that had watched her with love and respect and unwavering commitment. "I do," she said clearly. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Wesley, you may kiss your bride." Wesley pulled Clara close and kissed her thoroughly, to cheers and applause from their guests. When they finally broke apart, both laughing, the minister presented them to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Mrs. Wesley Grant." The celebration that followed was everything Clara could have hoped for. Tables laden with food, roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables, and more pies than she could count. Music for dancing, with Wesley leading Clara in the first waltz, while everyone watched and applauded. Toasts that made her laugh and cry, speeches about love and partnership and future happiness. As the afternoon stretched into evening and the party showed no signs of slowing, Wesley pulled Clara aside. "Want to escape?" he murmured in her ear. "Can we do that? It's our wedding." "That's exactly why we can do that," he grinned. "Everyone's having a wonderful time. They won't even notice we're gone." They slipped away quietly, riding together toward their new house as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Inside, Wesley had arranged for someone to light lamps and stock the kitchen, making the space warm and welcoming. "Welcome home, Mrs. Grant," Wesley said, carrying Clara over the threshold despite her laughing protests. He set her down gently in the middle of their new living room, and suddenly the laughter faded into something deeper and more profound. They were alone now, truly alone, in their house, with their whole future stretching before them. "I can't believe this is real," Clara whispered. "That I get to have this, have you." "Believe it," Wesley said, pulling her close. This is as real as it gets. You and me building a life together, merging our ranches, expanding the orchards, growing old side by side. Making apple pies every fall, Clara added with a smile, and arguing about cattle management, and dancing in empty rooms, and loving each other every single day, Wesley finished. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. I meant every word of those vows, Clara. You're my partner now, my equal in all things. What's mine is yours, not because the law says so, but because I choose it. And what's mine is yours, Clara echoed, though you're definitely getting the better deal in that arrangement. Wrong, Wesley said firmly. I'm getting you. That makes me the richest man in 3 territories. They spent their first night as husband and wife talking until dawn, wrapped in blankets on their new bed, making plans and dreaming dreams and occasionally stopping to kiss because they could, because they were married now, because they had the rest of their lives to do exactly this. As spring turned to summer, Clara settled into her new life with surprising ease. The house that had seemed so grand at first quickly became home, filled with her touches, curtains she'd sewn, preserves she'd made, flowers she'd planted. The merged ranches operated smoothly under Wesley's management, with Clara taking charge of expanding the orchard just as they'd planned. True to his word, Wesley treated Clara as a full partner in all decisions. They debated cattle breeding programs and irrigation systems, argued cheerfully about fence placement and equipment purchases, and discovered they worked together as beautifully as they danced. John's health continued improving, and with ranch hands to help with heavy work, he threw himself into orchard cultivation. The sight of her father vital and engaged again filled Clara with gratitude every single day. By midsummer, the expanded orchard was planted, 40 new trees that would take years to mature but represented their long-term vision. Wesley had made good on his promise to buy their entire apple production at premium prices, and other buyers had started seeking out Whitmore Grant apples specifically, having heard about their exceptional quality. One July evening, Clara and Wesley sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Clara's head rested on Wesley's shoulder, his arm around her waist, both of them quiet and content. "Do you remember the day we met?" Clara asked. "In the mercantile when those women were mocking my dress?" "I remember thinking they were fools who couldn't recognize quality when it was standing right in front of them," Wesley said. "I wanted to disappear. I felt so ashamed, so small." Clara paused. "And then you walked in and everything changed. You saw me, Wesley, really saw me, and you decided I was worth defending, worth knowing, worth loving." "Best decision I ever made," Wesley said firmly. "Do you ever regret it? Marrying a ranch girl instead of a society woman who knows how to host proper dinner parties?" Wesley turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Clara, look at me. Look at what we've built. This house, this land, this life. It's better than anything I imagined for myself. You've made me happier than I knew was possible. Every morning I wake up grateful that you said yes, that you took a chance on me. On you. Wesley, you're the one who took the chance. We both took chances, and we both won." He kissed her gently. "I love you, Clara Grant. I loved you in that patched calico dress, and I love you now in the beautiful dresses you make yourself. I loved you when you were scared and uncertain, and I love you now that you're confident and sure. I'll love you tomorrow and next year, and when we're old and gray." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears, grateful tears. "I love you too, more than I have words for." As autumn arrived and the apple trees bore their first small harvest, Clara reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. She'd gone from struggling alone to being part of a partnership that made everything better. She'd gone from feeling invisible to being truly seen. She'd gone from survival to actually thriving. The harvest celebration that October was particularly joyous. Clara and Wesley hosted friends and neighbors for dinner, serving apple pie made from their own fruit, while John regaled guests with stories about the orchard's expansion plans. Clara caught Wesley's eye across the crowded room and saw such love and pride in his expression that her heart swelled. Later, after the guests had gone and they were cleaning up together, Wesley pulled Clara into an impromptu waltz around their kitchen. "What are you doing?" Clara laughed. "Dancing with my wife," Wesley said, spinning her. Do I need a better reason? I suppose not. They danced without music until Clara was breathless and laughing, until the dishes were forgotten, and the only thing that mattered was this moment, this man, this life they'd built together. Winter arrived with the first snow in November, blanketing their ranch in white silence. Clara stood at the kitchen window one morning, watching flakes drift past, and felt Wesley's arms circle her waist from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "About a year ago. How scared I was, how uncertain. How I thought happiness like this only happened to other people." She leaned back against him. "Thank you for proving me wrong." "Thank you for that patched dress," Wesley said. "If you'd been wearing silk that day in the mercantile, I might never have had the excuse to talk to you." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "You would have found a way. You're persistent. Only when something matters." He kissed her nose, her cheeks, her lips. "And you, Clara Grant, matter more than anything." On Christmas morning, Wesley presented Clara with an unexpected gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover. "What's this for?" Clara asked, running her fingers over the smooth leather. "For recording our story. Our lives together, the ranch operations, orchard yields, whatever you want to preserve." Wesley smiled. "Someday we'll have children, and they'll want to know how their parents met. I thought you might want to write it down." Children. The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. They hadn't talked about it directly, but Clara had been feeling hopeful signs, had been wondering if perhaps... "Wesley, I think..." Clara took a breath. "I think I might be expecting." Wesley's eyes went wide. "You're pregnant?" "I'm not certain yet, but it's possible. Probable, even." She touched her stomach wonderingly. "We could have a baby by next summer." Wesley let out a whoop of joy and swept Clara into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. When he finally set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "A baby. Our baby." He placed his hand gently on her stomach. "Clara, this is... I don't have words." "Neither do I," Clara admitted. "I'm terrified and thrilled and hopeful all at once." "We're going to be amazing parents," Wesley said with certainty. "We'll teach them about the land, about integrity, about hard work and love and treating people with dignity, regardless of their circumstances." "We'll tell them about the patched dress," Clara added with a smile. "Definitely. It's an important part of the story, how their mother was mocked for her clothing but held her head high, how their father saw past fabric to the extraordinary woman underneath, how love grew from a moment of cruelty transformed by kindness." Clara rested her head against Wesley's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the solid warmth of him surrounding her. This was her life now, not struggling alone but building together, not invisible but truly seen, not merely surviving but genuinely thriving. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, worn down by responsibility and worry, unable to imagine happiness beyond making it through another day. That woman had walked into a mercantile in a patched dress and endured mockery that should have crushed her. But instead, that humiliation had led to this, to Wesley and love and partnership, to a merged ranch flourishing under their joint care, to a father healthy and happy again, to a future full of possibility, including perhaps a child growing inside her even now. "I love you," Clara whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." "Always," Wesley promised, the word he'd said so many times now, the word that had become their private vow. "I'll always see you, Clara, in patched dresses or silk, in struggle or triumph, in youth or old age. You're the finest woman I know, and that will never change." They stood together in their warm home while snow fell softly outside, wrapped in each other's arms and the certainty of their love. The journey from that moment in the mercantile to this moment in their home had been filled with fear and courage, with doubt and certainty, with endings and new beginnings. But standing here now, Clara understood something fundamental. Sometimes the hardest moments in life, the times of deepest humiliation or most profound struggle, are actually doorways to something better. Sometimes being broken open is what lets the light in. She'd been mocked for her patched dress. She'd felt small and worthless and invisible. And then a cowboy had walked through a door and said 6 words that changed everything. "She's still the finest woman here." Not because of what she wore or what she owned, but because of who she was. And that recognition, that seeing, had been the beginning of everything beautiful that followed. Clara smiled against Wesley's chest and felt their baby, their future, growing inside her. She thought about the orchard they'd expanded together, the life they'd built, the love they shared. She thought about her father healthy again, about neighbors who'd become friends, about a community that had learned to look beyond appearances to character. The patched dress hung in her closet now, preserved carefully. Not because she'd ever wear it again. Wesley had insisted on buying her an entire wardrobe of quality clothing, but because it represented something important. It was a reminder of where she'd been and how far she'd come. It was proof that worth isn't determined by fabric or fashion, but by integrity and character and how you treat others. Someday, she'd show that dress to their children and tell them the story. About cruelty met with grace, about judgment overcome by love, about a man who saw value where others saw only poverty, and their children would learn that what matters isn't what you wear or what you own, but who you are and how you treat people. They'd learn that love can grow from unlikely places. They'd learn that sometimes the finest treasures come in the simplest packages. "What are you thinking about?" Wesley asked, feeling Clara smile against him. "About everything," Claire said. "About us and how we started, and where we are now and where we're going. About how grateful I am for every single moment that led us here." "Even the hard moments?" "Especially the hard moments, because they made this possible." She pulled back to look up at him. "Wesley, I wouldn't change anything. Not 1 second of it. Because it all led to you, to us, to this life we're building." "That's good," Wesley said, his smile warm and certain. "Because I feel exactly the same way. Every choice, every moment, every step, they all led me to you, and I'd walk that path 1,000 times over if it meant ending up right here." Outside, the snow continued falling, blanketing their ranch in pristine white. Inside, warm and safe and deeply loved, Clara and Wesley stood together facing their future. A future full of apple harvests and cattle drives, of children's laughter and years of partnership, of challenges met together and triumphs shared. A future built on the foundation of a single moment when one person chose to see another's worth. A future that began with a patched dress and a cowboy's kindness. A future that would last a lifetime and beyond. And as Clara lifted her face for Wesley's kiss, as his arms tightened around her and their hearts beat in synchrony, she knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not despite the journey that brought her here, but because of it. Every patch, every thread, every moment of struggle and humiliation and fear, they'd all been worth it, because they'd led her home.